Chapter 81. What's happening? Has he completely lost his senses? He's just insulted Deluo Tiangong, and now he's actually challenging the soul-devouring sect to a fight to the death. Even the old man in black went pale. Fury flickered in his eyes as he glared at Ye Cheng with unmistakable murderous intent. "Young man, you really don't know how to die." He threw back his head and let out a harsh cry. Clasping his hands together, he then thrust them apart in a single, fluid motion. A ball of spiritual power erupted before him, dissolving into a pitch-black mist that writhed with hungry malevolence. In an instant, the mist coalesced into a 100-foot-long dragon, its maw open in a thunderous roar as it lunged straight at Ye Cheng. The moment the mist dragon appeared, cultivators in the crowd gasped. Many staggered, clutching their heads as though some invisible force tugged at their minds, tempting them to surrender their will and become part of that swirling black haze. That's the soul-devouring sect's signature technique, someone whispered. It's supposed to tear into your spirit. A nearby elder's face grew grave. The mind is the very foundation of a cultivator's strength. Once your sea of consciousness is damaged, recovery is all but impossible. Every one of their methods aims at fracturing your inner world, destroying you from the inside out. It's impossible to defend against this. A ripple of panic swept through the gathered cultivators. They trembled, pressing sweaty palms against their brows to shore up their formless seas of consciousness, frantic to keep their minds from being wrenched away. High above them, the soul-devouring sect's black-robed envoy, known as the Emperor's soul-catching envoy, floated on a cloud of dark chi. His eyes glittered with cruel anticipation as he summoned a 100-foot-long fog dragon, a sinuous beast of shadow and mist, its maw wide and hungry for the thoughts of mortals. But Ye Cheng remained utterly composed. He surveyed the thrashing tendrils of the spectral dragon, then said with a faint, amused smile, "So you devour thoughts and corrupt the sea of consciousness? Very well, let's see how your holy sect stands up to that." "Open," he called, voice ringing out like a war horn. In that instant, the barrier over his third eye between the brows cracked apart. A fierce vortex of spirit chi burst free, curling outward in inky spirals. Its hunger was palpable, an all-consuming void that reached out for the attacking dragon. With barely a sound, the two forces met. The envoy's fog dragon lunged forward, jaws snapping, but Ye Cheng's vortex met it head-on, wrapping it in churning darkness. Within moments, the dragon was pulled inside the whirlwind of his consciousness and devoured. The assembled cultivators gasped. Even the Emperor's soul-catching envoy recoiled, shock contorting his features. What is he doing?" someone whispered incredulously. He's unleashed his own sea of consciousness. He's devouring our attack." Silence settled over the battlefield as the last tendrils of fog dissolved. Ye Cheng opened his eyes, calm and piercing, his victory plain on his lips. The soul-devouring sect's envoy hovered off balance, face pale. And in that pregnant pause, everyone understood. The real battle was only just beginning. Everyone froze at Ye Cheng's sudden move. Had they really seen that? Even the old man in black blinked in disbelief before bursting into cruel laughter. "Ha! You little wretch, you're begging for death, and I'm more than happy to grant it." He twisted his hands into intricate seals, shadows coiling around his palms. "Detonate," he hissed. He expected to witness Ye Cheng's spirit sea shatter, skull cracking, brain matter raining down. Instead, his triumphant grin froze. The mist dragon he'd unleashed into Ye Cheng's mind had simply vanished. It dove into that vast inner realm and was never heard from again, like a lone carp lost in an endless ocean. "This isn't your spirit sea," the old man growled, his voice tremble, with shock. "What have you done, boy? Where's my soul-devouring mist?" The soul-devouring mist was to the sect what a life magic weapon was to an ordinary cultivator. Indispensable. Now that Ye Cheng had seized it, the old man in black felt half his power slip away, and with it, his composure. His heart thundered, panic flooding his eyes. "Isn't this my sea of consciousness?" the old man stammered, staring at the swirling expanse before him. Ye Cheng's lips curved into a cold smile. "Old man, you'd better look more closely." He raised his hand, and a brilliant light erupted from the spot between his eyebrows. At that instant, the soul-devouring mist, formerly under the old man's control, shuddered, as if tied by invisible chains. The cultivator tried to wrench it free, but an overwhelming pressure bore down from every direction. He staggered back, realization dawning on him like a blade to the heart. This vast sea, he whispered, voice cracking. He'd spent years seeking some secret treasure, some fabled pool of power, only to find that what he'd believed was his own sea of consciousness was actually Ye Cheng's. A place so immense it had swallowed his senses whole. Impossible! This can't be! He roared. But the light between Ye Cheng's brows only grew fiercer, and the old man's protests were drowned by its piercing radiance. In that moment, the old man in black understood the true depth of his blunder. He was trapped, deep within another's consciousness, and the stolen soul-devouring mist was nothing more than bait. Ye Cheng held the real power, and now, the upper hand. How can your divine consciousness be so powerful? How can your sea of consciousness be so terrifying? In the mist-shrouded realm of thoughts, the black-robed elder's consciousness had taken form as a massive fog dragon, its body woven from the soul-devouring fog he commanded. He steered the dragon through the haze in desperate flight, seeking any gap in Ye Cheng's mental defenses, only to find every escape route blocked by Ye Cheng's overwhelming divine power. At last, with a thunderous crack, the 100-foot-long dragon and the elder's own wisp of will were rent apart and obliterated by the onslaught of Ye Cheng's divine thought. Outside his mind, the black-robed elder reeled backward, blood spurting from his lips as he stared at Ye Cheng through trembling eyes. Quivering fingers pointed across the distance, and he gasped between ragged breaths. Your divine thought, it can't be. It's impossible for it to be merely an emperor's. Fear and disbelief warred in his heart. Never before had the soul-devouring sect's god-emperors, no matter how exalted, wielded a power capable of shattering even their mightiest soul-devouring fog. Yet here he stood, defeated. Ye Cheng's divine consciousness had proven far beyond any measure the sect had known. When did a monster like this invade my spiritual realm? The elder hissed, struggling to rouse his divine consciousness and warn the soul-devouring sect. But Ye Cheng gave him no opportunity. In an instant, Ye Cheng's eyes flew open, and his divine consciousness swelled outward like a great sea, coalescing into a misty dragon not unlike the black-clad elder himself. With a single thought, Ye Cheng drew in the elder's remaining divine essence and swallowed it whole, refining it into nourishment for his own spirit. A low exhale escaped Ye Cheng's lips as he felt the surge of power within him. He regarded the now vanquished elder with cool detachment. This opponent had indeed been formidable, an emperor-level cultivator backed by the soul-devouring sect's inheritance. Ordinarily, it would take some cunning stratagems even among peak god-emperors to fell such a foe. But Ye Cheng excelled in attacks of the mind. Having unlocked the red ninth-grade fate of his heavenly refined holy body, his divine thoughts had become positively terrifying, outstripping even his prodigious physical prowess. And with that, the challenge was already won. In raw combatability, Ye Cheng stood on equal footing with a divine emperor. Yet when the amplifying power of his divine thoughts was taken into account, any gap that might separate him from a holy emperor dwindled to insignificance. For ordinary divine emperors, trying to display their own divine thoughts before him was nothing more than tamely showing off before an expert and a swift path to destruction. Slaying the black-clad old man had yielded more than just glory. In the process, Ye Cheng had unlocked a new application of his divine thoughts, the soul-devouring mist, a secret technique capable of consuming an enemy's very soul and consciousness. This special move wasn't devised in vain, he murmured to himself, testing the lingering echo of power in his veins. Below him, the assembled cultivators stared in stunned silence. The once formidable soul-catcher of the soul-devouring sect, who had reached the perfection heavenly emperor realm, had been felled without landing a single blow. His body lay crushed, his divine aura snuffed out in an instant. Throats parched and hearts pounding, the spectators knew they would never forget this southern ceremony, and the terrifying prowess of the young man now called Ye Cheng. The Kanglan saint, whose own brother was a divine emperor's disciple and one of the spiritual domain's top 10 prodigies, had been slain. In an instant, the Kanglan Holy Land, which had held sway over the southern realm for nearly 10,000 years, was erased from history. At the same time, a soul catcher from the soul-devouring sect had been cut down. Each of these blows alone would have sent shockwaves through the southern spiritual domain, yet all three calamities converged during this very southern ceremony. High above the assembled cultivators, a lone figure stood on a drifting cloud. He wore robes whiter than fresh snow, his bearing calm and otherworldly, as though he were an exile immortal armed with a single sword. Silence fell over the crowd, broken only when a cool, resonant voice rang out. Ye Cheng. No one dared speak. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the white-robed god king, etching his name into their hearts. In that same instant, Emperor Xuan's voice whispered within Ye Cheng's mind, stirring the young cultivator to full awareness far above the southern ceremony's tumult. Fellow Taoist Ye Cheng, you've really let your temper get the better of you. Emperor Xuan's voice, calm yet heavy with warning, rolled across the shattered courtyard. Even a god-emperor of his stature felt a twinge of apprehension now. If the soul-devouring sect ever allies with Daluo Heavenly Palace, not even I may be able to shield you. Ye Cheng stood amid the debris, his robes stained and tattered. He met the emperor's gaze with cool indifference. He was powerful, undeniably so, but habitually indifferent to consequence. Cross him, insult him, or curb his impulses, and you would meet your end. Before they'd entered the Kanglan Holy Land, Emperor Xuan had cautioned him, this place poses little real danger. But the Kanglan lineage commands respect. If you offend the Holy Maiden, you must teach her a lesson, cripple her if you must, but do not take her life. Clearly, Ye Cheng had brushed aside that advice. He had slain the Holy Maiden outright. Emperor Xuan's lips tightened into a grim line. Technically, he could depart whenever he chose, but once Ye Cheng tangled with Daluo Heavenly Palace, the palace master would regard the killing as a grave insult. The fallout could overwhelm even a god. Moreover, Ye Cheng had only just rebuilt his true body. His current power still lagged far behind his prime. If Daluo's wrath descended, Ye Cheng might not withstand it, and neither, for that matter, could any who dared to stand by him. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken consequences. Ye Cheng brushed a lock of hair from his eyes and gave a faint, mocking bow. Your warning is noted, Emperor Xuan. I shall consider my future targets more carefully. But in his eyes burned the same reckless light, and Emperor Xuan knew that once this spark ignited the powder keg of Daluo Heavenly Palace's vengeance, no admonition, no godly intervention would be enough to douse the flames. Even at her zenith, Empress Xuan trembled at the very thought of a spirit colossus like Daluo Tiangong. Don't worry, Ye Cheng replied softly. He understood her fears, but she didn't know that he'd never been reckless enough to rely on her for protection. His true safeguard was hidden elsewhere, the legendary Tianzun puppet, his ultimate trump card. Ye Cheng was no fool. If he'd been rash, he would have whisked his wife off to the Kanglan Holy Land long ago and avenged himself. Instead, he'd chosen patience, biding his time until the right moment to reveal his secret weapon. Empress Xuan would learn the truth soon enough. Meanwhile, far to the south, in the vast expanse of the spiritual realm, just outside Daluo Palace in Luotian City, an opulent hall glowed beneath 1,000 lanterns. Silk drapes swayed gently, and laughter rang out as courtiers toasted one another. Perched on a carved dais was a striking youth, whose delicate, almost ethereal features blurred the line between beauty and androgyny. He raised his cup with a flourish, savoring the warmth of good company, when suddenly, buzz! A tremor ran through the air. The young man's finely wrought storage ring quivered at his waist. He froze, eyes wide, as the jade plate inscribed with the single character Xuan began to crack. In an instant, it shattered into countless fragments that vanished into the ring's void, leaving him staring at empty air and an uneasy silence that spoke of something terribly wrong. Ye Cheng started up abruptly, the sudden movement crushing the spirit wine cup in his hand. Chapter 82. Bai Feng, what's wrong? Hua Lianyi called, her brow creasing with concern. The moment Yue Bai Feng moved, his companions turned pale and rushed forward. Brother Yue, what happened? Though his expression softened at their anxious voices, the fire in his eyes remained undiminished. He inhaled deeply, speaking in a low, tense tone. My sister, Ling Xuan's jade token just shattered. His words struck the group like a thunderclap. This was no trivial matter. Yue Baifeng was the palace master of Daluo Tiangong, the foremost disciple in the realm of Divine Emperor Perfection, and currently ranked 9th on the spirit list. Anyone who counted themselves his friend boasted similarly powerful backing, Divine Emperor patrons, noble lineages, or both. The most distinguished among them, and the one who had just spoken, was Hua Lianyi. Though she did not hail from the Divine Emperor sect, she represented one of the few Saint Emperor powers that truly stood at the summit of the spirit realm. She was the granddaughter of the Saint Emperor Patriarch of the Saint Emperor sect, adored by thousands since birth. During one of her spirit trials, she chanced upon Yue Baifeng. Though her appearance was unremarkable, the moment he learned her true lineage, Yue Baifeng pledged himself to her protection. His striking good looks and steadfast devotion soon won her heart. The two have been officially betrothed and are scheduled to wed next year. She also understood Yue Baifeng's deep affection for his sister, Yue Lingxuan, so how could Lingxuan be dead? What happened? Everyone pressed. Yue Baifeng shook his head, admitting to himself that he suspected his proud sister had underestimated her enemy. Yet as he spoke, a flash of ice lit in his dark eyes and his fist clenched. She was his sister, and by heaven, someone was responsible for her death. No matter who you are, I will destroy every branch of your 9 clans, he vowed, murderous intent blazing. Then with effort, he quelled the storm within. Rising to his feet, he bowed deeply to his gathered friends. Thank you all for your support. I'm heading back to the palace first. I'll find out who murdered Lingxuan and make them pay. Yes, everyone chorused, voices raw with anger. Lingxuan was Brother Yue's sister. Whoever did this must answer with their blood. And not just that, one of Yue Baifeng's closest companions added fiercely, they'll wash out their clan in blood and shatter their family line. At his friend's impassioned agreement, Hua Lianyi stepped forward, eyes blazing. Baifeng, count me in too. Just say the word. Yue Baifeng gave a curt nod. Thank you. I'll call on you all when the time comes. With that, he turned, sweeping his cloak around him, and soared straight out of Luotian City toward the mountain gate of Daluo Tiangong. His friends watched him go, each of them silently vowing to stand at his side. By dusk, Yue Baifeng arrived at the ruins of the Southern Grand Ceremonies Arena. In the aftermath of Kanglan Holy Land's destruction, the contest had ended abruptly. No champion was formally crowned. Yet everyone present already knew who had proven the strongest. Yue Baifeng knelt among the fallen pillars and shattered jade in the flickering torchlight, determined to uncover the truth behind his sister's death. As he examined the scene, dark suspicion gnawed at him. This was no accident, and it would take more than grief to set things right. A messenger approached on hurried wings, holding out 2 pale green jade tokens. Your Grace, these are the entry tokens for Dream Spring, he said, bowing low. Yue Baifeng took them, his expression grim. Thank you. Keep watch here. We may need to return. He slipped the tokens into his robes and rose to his full height, resolve burning in his eyes. Tonight, he would begin his journey to uncover the assassin's identity, and to ensure that whoever dared to harm Lingxuan would face retribution unimaginable. These 2 tokens, the yin and the yang, give you full authority over all 200 slots to enter Dream Spar, Eingeng. In Kanglan City's lordly mansion, now a makeshift palace for Ye Cheng and his clan, the envoys from Yuehua Holy Land and Tianshan Holy Land knelt and presented their Dream Spring tokens with solemn respect. Ye Cheng accepted the 2 charms, closed his eyes, and wove his spiritual energy into them, instantly clarifying their functions and sealing their power. A hush fell over the room as the southern delegates watched their prized inheritance slip away. Mengyu's spring was the legacy of their holy places, an ancient source of boundless spiritual qi, and yet here they were, surrendering control. Still, none dared voice regret, for the might and authority Ye Cheng had already displayed left no room for protest. In the southern lands, it was clear that the God King must be obeyed. When the ritual concluded, Ye Cheng turned and handed both refined tokens to his father, Gu Yuan. Father, he said calmly, we have 200 places to fill. Reserve 100 for our most trusted disciples and elders, and set aside 10 for my own use. I may need these in the future. As for the rest, Ye Cheng offered a faint smile. Father, take a look at these. If we trade them, the Gu family could secure a wealth of cultivation resources. At Ye Cheng's words, Gu Yuan's eyes suddenly lit up. Below them, the envoys from the various powers, once trembling with fear, fell silent, peering up with newfound hope. They had been terrified that the Gu clan would seize every available position in the Mengyuquan. But now, it seemed there was still a chance for them. Excitement shone in their eyes. Gu Yuan felt his own heartbeat quicken. 200 places in the Mengyuquan. If he offered only 90 in exchange, the resources gained, combined with their existing control over the circle, would send the Gu family's strength soaring. And with Kanglan Sanctuary already reduced to ashes by Gu Ye Cheng, its lands and inheritance now nourished their clan even further. He nodded eagerly, scarcely able to contain his excitement. It will be another 3 months before Mengyo Spring fully opens. But once we reclaim the Kanglan Sacred Lands manor for the Gu family, we can begin assimilating its power immediately, Gu Yuan said, eyes shining with excitement. It will make our clan stronger than ever. Gu Ye Cheng remained calm. The gains from this southern ritual had unfolded precisely as he'd predicted, aside from one unexpected wrinkle, the soul-devouring sect's interference. He folded his arms, a faint smile curving his lips. The soul-devouring sect? If they come looking for trouble, we'll simply crush them. With that, he handed his father the official talisman granting access to Mengyu Spring. The elder Gu accepted it with reverent care, tucking it safely away. Gu Ye Cheng then addressed the envoys from the southern powers who had gathered, offering them assurances of the Gu family's goodwill. Satisfied, he and his clan rose and departed, every major force in the south watching in awe as they embarked on the journey home. Not far off, the disciples of Xianyin Pavilion boarded the immortal-grade Tianyin flying boat, preparing to return to their sect. Just as the ship's runes flared to life and lifted them from the ground, boom! A thunderous roar shattered the skies, echoing from the distant sea of clouds below. In an instant, every cultivator aboard Xianyin Pavilion snapped to attention, their relief vanishing as they braced for whatever threat had just revealed itself. High above the sea of clouds, the flying boat cleaved the mist, its lofty banner bearing the fiery dragon sigil of the Yanlong dynasty. At the helm, robes billowing, stood the God King himself. With a soft whoosh, Fairy Lu swept forth from the vessel's palace, alighting with silent grace before the assembled disciples of Xianyin Pavilion, her eyes, cool as still water, fixed on the approaching envoy. "Fellow Taoist," she called, her tone icy, "what business brings you to Xianyin Pavilion? Are you truly prepared to unleash war over so trivial an offense?" The god K, Ing's face went pale. He knelt, pressing palms together in earnest apology. "Please, Fairy Lu, speak no more of conflict. All past transgressions were mine alone. I beg your forgiveness and mercy." With that, he produced 3 jade-green pouches shimmering with condensed spiritual energy. They hovered before the pavilion's disciples, each emanating a soft, captivating glow. Gasps rippled through the assembly. "These," the God King said, voice sincere, "are the Yanlong dynasty's humble tokens of apology. May they convey our deepest regret and respect. I pray you accept them, Fairy Lu." The God King of the Yanlong dynasty dropped to his knees and bowed so many times his forehead nearly scraped the floor. When he finally rose, he thrust forward a small gift, then turned and fled without a trace of his usual emperor-level arrogance. The disciples of Xianyin Pavilion gaped in astonishment. None of them had ever seen the mighty Yanlong ruler act so submissively. Only Master Lu and Bai Yueling exchanged knowing looks. "He's not afraid of our pavilion," Master Lu murmured. "He's terrified of God King Gu Ye Cheng's power." A soft sigh escaped her lips as she recalled Ye Cheng's legendary deeds, the complete destruction of Kanglan, the Emperor's own beheading, and the slaying of the dreaded Soul Envoy. Even now, her pulse fluttered at the memory. She turned to her disciples and noticed Bai Yueling gazing intently at 3 softly glowing storage pouches that hung from her belt. Originally, Master Lu had no intention of parting with those treasures. They had been won by Gu Ye Cheng's might and rightfully belonged to him. Yet as she studied Bai Yueling's bright, hopeful eyes, she felt something shift. Perhaps fate was giving her young disciple a stroke of good luck. With a nod, she summoned the pouches into the air and sent them drifting gently to Bai Yueling's outstretched hands. "Linger," she said in a voice that brooked no refusal. Deliver these directly to God King Ye Cheng. Hurry now, he must not wait. Go! Hurry! At her master's command, Bayueling, young, untested, and trembling with nerves, darted after the Gu family's flying boat as it vanished into the misty sky. Meanwhile, the grand southern ceremony had just drawn to a close in the heart of the spiritual domain. In that very moment, the heavens convulsed with a staggering pressure that radiated across all four quadrants, sweeping over thousands of miles. Cultivators throughout the central realm froze, wide-eyed with shock. They recognized that potent, oppressive aura instantly. Whenever a peerless prodigy is born, this same phenomenon flares to life above the sea of clouds at the domain's center. It's an upheaval in the spirit ranking, one disciple gasped. The spirit ranking is about to update again, another added, voices trembling with anticipation. Chapter 83 news spread through the spirit realm like wildfire. Every cultivator, whether a fledgling adept, a venerable elder, or one of the mighty giants who command entire sects, paused in their tracks. They emerged from their dojos and training halls, lifted their eyes to the sky, and sensed the same chill of foreboding. Even the most confident prodigies, those who prided themselves on brilliance and bravado, fell silent and stared upward. What grim spectacle held them all in thrall was the spirit list, an artifact of such mystery that its very mention set hearts racing. Behind its sudden appearance stood the soul-devouring sect, a hidden order whose influence threads through realms far and wide. History records only this: whenever the soul-devouring sect moves in force, it heralds a crimson storm. Yet even that fearsome reputation pales beside the true power at work: the Heavenly Secret Sect. No one knows where the Heavenly Secret Sect obtains its intelligence, nor how it recruits disciples. Their strength remains untullied, their motives inscrutable. Across the spirit realm, cultivators share but one certainty: this sect has endured for countless generations, veiled in secrecy so complete that even the Holy Emperor steers clear of its wrath. And so, as the spirit list drifts ominously overhead, every soul in the realm holds its breath, waiting for whatever dreadful decree will follow. The sky trembled with shifting hues as the heavenly secrets turned, an ancient signal that the spirit ranking was about to be revealed. A heavy, radiant pressure settled over the mid-sky of the spirit domain, drawing every elite cultivator's gaze upward. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who would claim a coveted spot on this illustrious roll? A low hum pulsed through the air, and spiritual energy coalesced into a brilliant pillar of light. From its apex unfurled a translucent scroll, upon which 100 names appeared in descending order. Murmurs of surprise broke out as Yue Baifeng was listed 9th. Further down, the name Su Ziyu, whom Gu Ye Cheng and his companions had encountered in the Xuanhuang secret realm, sparked excited recognition. Finally, all eyes were drawn to the very top of the list: Luo Shenyue. A living legend of the spirit domain, Luo Shenyue was celebrated not only as the most beautiful woman of her generation, but as its most luminous talent in cultivation. At her name, the assembled cultivators bowed their heads in collective awe, honored to witness her unrivaled grace and power enshrined in first place. Before the Qianji sect even updated the spirit list, her reputation had already spread like wildfire throughout the spirit realm. From the moment Luo Shenyue ascended into the king realm, she challenged, one by one, the prodigies already ranked on that list. Each time she broke through a new tier of cultivation, her standing shot upward. 3 years ago, she finally claimed the top spot, and in all that time, despite more than 10 reshuffles of the list, no one has ever managed to displace her. As the assembled disciples quietly recalled Luo Shenyue's legendary rise, their eyes drifted back to the remaining names on the spirit list. How many would stay? How many would fall this time? Their speculation was cut short by a sudden chime. Buzz! On the display, a previously unlisted name had just appeared, and not at the bottom, but leaping straight into 18th place. 18th! Where did this genius come from? A ripple of astonishment swept through the crowd. Before anyone could gather their thoughts, the next announcement blinked into view. Chapter 22. As the spirit list's towering projection flickered overhead, a collective gasp rippled through the assembled cultivators. The name, formerly sitting at 22nd place, had not simply slipped to 23rd, he'd been pushed all the way down to 24th, and everyone below him tumbled back 2 spots. Did he really fall 2 places at once? 2 new geniuses broke into the top 30 in one go? Even the most seasoned masters stared in disbelief. Then, emerging on the screen where no name had been before, was a newcomer utterly unknown in the Central Spirit Realm. 23. Ye Cheng, Han Qin Empire. A murmur spread like wildfire. Ye Cheng? Who is he? Han Qin Empire? Where's that? Before anyone could piece together an answer, another unfamiliar entry blinked into view, now occupying the 22nd slot. 22. Zhonglianxin Han Qin Empire. Shock turned to outright astonishment. 2 entirely new names from the obscure Han Qin Empire, both vaulting into the top 24. This defied everything the onlookers thought they knew about the power structure of the spirit realm. As whispers swelled into excited chatter, a sudden shout cut through the crowd. Look, the first-place slot is flashing. Cultivators craned their necks to see. The very top entry on the spirit list, long considered immutable, was inexplicably pulsating with light. Faces went pale. What unprecedented event could possibly be unfolding before their eyes? Who could possibly unseat Luo Shenyue from first place? At that exclamation, the assembled crowd froze in disbelief. Heads whipped skyward just in time to see Luo Shenyue's name, once indelibly carved at the summit of the spirit list, slowly vanishing before their eyes. With her erasure, every other genius on the list was abruptly pushed down 1 rank. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, their faces paling as they struggled to comprehend what was happening. One voice finally broke the stunned silence. What on earth is going on here? Never before had anyone dared to challenge Luo Shenyue's top spot, and now, for the very first time, her place had been claimed by someone else. The crowd stood motionless, robes clutched tightly in trembling hands, hearts pounding as they waited, breath held, for the mysterious new name to appear at the head of the spirit list. Chapter 84. For a long moment there was only silence. The vast sea of clouds stilled. The upheaval in the spiritual energies of heaven and earth subsided. One by one, the cultivators who had gathered on the central peaks came back to their senses, but their hearts still trembled with shock. When at last they dared to look, every eye was fixed on the same truth. First place on the spiritual ranking list, Ye Cheng of the Han Qin Empire. A murmur swelled into an uproar. Every grandmaster and prodigy in attendance was stunned by this reversal. Who was this unknown Ye Cheng? What kind of power lay behind the distant Han Qin Empire? Send scouts to verify, someone barked. Find out everything you can about this Han Qin Empire, and this Ye Cheng, whoever he is. By the time dusk painted the skies, the entire central spiritual domain was in turmoil. Noble sects and hidden clans alike scrambled to dispatch envoys. Even Imperial Preceptor Yue Baifeng, long regarded as unshakable, was visibly unsettled by the astonishing news. Among those preparing to investigate was the Su family, one of the secretive lineages that thrived in the domain's heart. Carriages were being readied, lanterns packed, and envoys briefed, when a gentle voice stopped them at the courtyard gate. There's no need to probe this matter. Suzaku, the family's young mistress, stood framed by the moonlit pillars, her eyes still wide with disbelief. In that silence, every attendant sensed that her single sentence carried a weight none could yet fathom. When the announcement of the updated spiritual list arrived, Suzaku had just emerged from her secluded retreat. Curious, she stepped into the clan hall, only to freeze when she read that Ye Cheng and his companions had earned places on the new list. She had already witnessed their extraordinary gifts back in the Xuanhuang secret realm, talents that far surpassed those of ordinary cultivators, but this recognition still took her breath away. Steeling herself, she met the bewildered gazes of her relatives and spoke in a calm, authoritative voice. I've discovered their origins. They're from the Han Qin Empire and belong to the Gu clan. A stunned murmur rippled through the Su household. The Han Qin Empire? One elder repeated. Isn't that the little realm tucked away in the southern reaches of the spiritual domain? That's right, Suzaku confirmed. Disbelief spread like wildfire. But the southern region is a barren backwater, another relative protested. How could it produce geniuses of this caliber? Her revelation left everyone reeling. Indeed, the south was the poorest quarter of the entire spiritual domain, Its only claim to fame, a lone Tianhuang realm sect, perched in isolation, yet audacious enough to call itself a sacred land, and from that very obscurity had emerged Ye Cheng and his peerless talents. The Su clan sat in stunned silence. Never in their wildest dreams had they imagined that a single academy in the south could produce not just one spirit list prodigy, but the #1 ranked genius and 2 more students in the top 30. Until now, no one from the south had ever even appeared on the list. "My lady," one of the elders whispered, glancing at Su Yulan, whose expression had not wavered. Only now did they understand. This was no idle boast. It really is extraordinary. Far to the north, deep within the spirit realm, the grand ancestral estate of the Luo family buzzed with even greater excitement. For years, Luo Shenyue, known within spirit circles simply as the First Lady, had held unchallenged dominion over the spirit list. Though the rankings shifted over time, no rival had ever unseated her. The prestige of the Luo family rested on more than Shenyue's title. She was the first name to appear when the spirit list was published each year, and only afterward did the world scramble to acknowledge her true might. Yet now, whispers carried on the wind, a southern upstart had not only claimed the top spot, but also pushed 2 others into the elite ranks. The news sent ripples through every ancient lineage and power in the spirit realm. For the first time in memory, Lady Luo's supremacy was genuinely and terrifyingly under threat. Luo Shenyue had never even appeared on Tianji Tower's spirit list, and yet she'd already defeated every listed prodigy, from the lowest rank to the very top. In the spirit realm's 10,000-year history, no one had ever claimed the #1 spot through sheer personal strength alone, until now. Then, just as everyone basked in her unprecedented achievement, the honor was snatched away by a name no one recognized: Ye Cheng. A ripple of indignation passed through the gathered Luo family disciples as they stared at the new name floating in the sky. Still, none of them truly worried. "Our young lady has spent 2 years in seclusion, perfecting the family's supreme techniques," one whispered. "She hasn't stepped outside, much less taken action in public. Of course, Tianji Tower misjudged her." "Just you wait," another said with confidence. "The moment she emerges from seclusion, that top spot will be hers again." For now, all they could do was wait and hope. Everyone at the mansion instinctively turned toward the Luo family's ancestral grounds, anticipation shining in their eyes. They all hoped their young mistress would emerge from seclusion today. It was as if fate itself had heard their silent prayers. Boom! A dazzling column of light shot up from the ancestral land. An icy aura rippled outward, sweeping across the courtyard. Every Luo family cultivator, even those of the highest ranks, felt a chill creep into their bones, triggering a shiver they couldn't suppress. Yet fear was nowhere in sight. Instead, they stared at the radiant beam with fervent excitement. Within that pillar of light hovered a lone figure, a girl clad in gleaming silver armor, a slender sword at her side. Her features were exquisitely beautiful, but it was her unyielding spirit and ethereal composure that stole every onlooker's breath. She floated there, motionless, eyes half closed, as if she were a forlorn moon drifting through a silent sky, capable of casting the world into stillness and frost. This sword-wielding maiden was none other than Luo Shenyue, formerly the unrivaled #1 on the spirit rank. At last, the young mistress had stepped out of her long seclusion. I could hear a commotion outside my door. "What's all the excitement about?" I asked, stepping into the corridor. A dozen of the Luo family's younger disciples froze in their tracks, their eyes shining with deference as they stared at me, Luo Shenyue. Wordlessly, they exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Elder Maid Lan, who had served our household for years, cleared her throat. "Miss, the spirit ranking list has just been updated," she said, bowing her head respectfully. I raised an eyebrow. "The list has changed? That hardly seems worth all this racket." Her expression tightened. "Forgive me, miss, but this update is unprecedented. You've been pushed down, from first place to second." I frowned. "Second place? And who's taken the lead?" She hesitated for a heartbeat, then met my gaze. "A newcomer, Master Ye Cheng, originally from the Han Qin Empire. His origins are unknown, but his cultivation score has soared to the top." A jolt of surprise shot through me. "Ye Cheng?" I echoed, disbelief creeping into my voice. At once, the assembled disciples bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the floor, as if bracing for my wrath. I held up a hand to still them. My heart pounded, but outwardly I remained calm. Whoever this Ye Cheng was, he just turned our world upside down. Despite her usually gentle demeanor, even toward the servants, Luo Shenyue's composure was legendary. So when someone at last usurped the coveted top spot on the spirit ranking, it was the first time her throne had ever been threatened. Everyone braced themselves, certain she would erupt in fury. Instead, they watched in stunned silence as she broke into a delighted smile. "Ha! Wonderful news," she called out, her voice brimming with excitement rather than anger or shame. Her eyes sparkled. "I've been in seclusion for 2 years because there simply haven't been any worthy opponents. It's been unbearably dull. But now, someone has finally given me a challenge. My 2 years haven't been wasted after all." As she spoke, her joy grew more palpable, and light danced in her eyes. She pointed toward a nearby maid. "You there? Send word to the family immediately. Find out where this genius, Ye Cheng, comes from and where he is right now. As soon as you have those details, report straight to me." Leaning forward, Luo Shenyue's excitement became almost tangible. "I'm heading to the Han Qin Empire myself. I intend to see exactly what Brother Gu is capable of." Luo Shenyue couldn't have cared less about spirit rankings. Whether she'd faced down the top prodigies before or set her sights now on Ye Cheng, her aim was always the same: to prove herself through combat, to sharpen her skills in the crucible of battle, and, above all, to find a truly worthy opponent. And now, Ye Cheng was that opponent. "I hope this Brother Gu lives up to my expectations," she murmured, her eyes glittering with anticipation. Meanwhile, word of this new challenger ignited a firestorm across the central spirit realm. Every major sect mobilized its forces to locate Ye Cheng and to chart the movements of the Han Qin Empire, but progress was slow, except among those with a personal grudge. Chief among them was Daluo Palace. In her private audience chamber, Yu Baifeng's face was as cold and hard as polished jade. At her feet knelt a trembling elder of the Daluo Tiangong sect. "Is it true," she hissed through clenched teeth, "that the Gu family of the Han Qin Empire slew my sister in the southern reaches of the spiritual domain?" "Your Highness," the elder stammered, bowing his head low, "I swear it on my life. Not only did they kill her, but all reports confirm that the Gu family's power is far greater than anyone suspected. Not long ago, they razed the Kanglan Holy Land. Their strength alone is that of an emperor-level powerhouse." At this, Yu Baifeng's brow snapped tight. He'd planned to handle everything by himself. After all, who in the southern reaches of the spiritual domain could stand against him? But now he saw how naive that was. Anyone capable of destroying the Kanglan Holy Land could not be a simple cultivator, and he himself hadn't even broken through to the imperial realm. He was no match. Still, there was one sliver of hope. "I can't take them on alone," Yu Baifeng admitted, his voice low. "But if my master steps in—" A fierce light ignited in his eyes. He swept his hand, dismissing the attendant at his side, and raced to the inner hall. Gong Yu, the palace master of the great Luo Heavenly Palace, looked up from his meditation seat as Yue Baifeng burst in. When the young disciple explained how the enemy had shattered Kanglan Holy Land and slain Yue Baifeng's sister, the old man's face darkened. "Very well," Gong Yu said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of iron justice. "If they dared destroy the Kanglan Holy Land, they must pay the price. I will accompany you, and we will avenge your sister." Yue Baifeng is the palace master's most prized disciple, an extraordinary talent destined to become the backbone of Daluo Tiangong. Since joining the Celestial Palace, Yue Baifeng has absorbed every lesson the palace master himself could teach, never once disappointing him. To rank 9th on the spirit list is no small feat. Yue Baifeng has eclipsed the heirs of several great sects in the spirit realm, even those backed by saint emperors. A disciple of such caliber must be protected at all costs. What worries the palace master most, however, is that this setback could become an inner demon for Yue Baifeng. After all, she is his own sister, and derail her future cultivation. There is no option but to act immediately. He cannot simply abandon his supreme genius. Still, he added, they managed to destroy the Kanglan Holy Land, so they must have powerful cards up their sleeves. A lion must unleash its full strength against a rabbit. When the time comes, Uncle Yulong, you will accompany me." "Thank you, Master," Yue Baifeng exclaimed, his excitement growing by the moment. Uncle Yulong, whom Palace Master Deluo had mentioned, is one of the 2 deputy masters of Deluo Palace, and his cultivation is every bit as formidable as the Palace Master's. Both stand at the late stage of the Divine Emperor realm. 2 such titans could, without breaking a sweat, crush any faction in the southern spirit realm, or even lay waste to the entire region if they chose. On one front, Yue Baifeng was already marshaling troops and gathering allies to avenge the Gu family's downfall. But in a silent void, just beyond the spirit realm's boundary, something else was stirring. A sudden ripple of energy whispered through empty space, and a lone figure materialized, drifting to a halt before the realm's shimmering barrier. He was clad in a flowing black robe that billowed without any breeze, his face hidden beneath a deep hood. From the shadowed slit of his cowl glowed 2 misty blue flames, ghostly, flickering embers that burned like supernatural fire. Such an otherworldly aura could only belong to a divine emperor. The robed stranger's gaze fixed on the spirit realm below. For a long moment, he remained motionless, as if listening to the realm's heartbeat. Then, within the eerie blue glow of his eyes, a solitary silhouette took form, an omen of calamity to come. If Ye Cheng were here, he would have recognized in an instant the face before him, the once mighty soul-binding envoy of the soul-devouring sect he had slain so decisively. And yet, behind that still form, a ghostly blue flame had already kindled. In the sect's parlance, such a fire meant the soul had truly departed. "Fascinating," a cold voice echoed from beyond the void. "Absolutely fascinating. Who dares to shatter my sacred sect's formation here in the spirit realm? Such audacity." A black-robed figure materialized at the edge of the rift, lips curving into a cruel sneer. In the next heartbeat, he streaked toward the breach like a falling star, the wide sleeves of his robe billowing like dark wings. Embroidered on his back was the blood-red emblem of a death sickle, its snarling edges pulsing ominously in the darkness. Chapter 85. The southern reaches of the spiritual domain buzzed with activity as the Grand Southern Ceremony drew to a close. Cultivators from every sect packed up their encampments and prepared to journey home. Rumors of the Kanglan Holy Land's sudden annihilation rippled through the southern provinces, carrying shock and disbelief in their wake. At the same time, word of the Gu family's remarkable ascendancy began to spread far and wide, though it had yet to reach the most remote frontiers. Every major power in the south had already received the startling news. Take Yuehua Holy Land, for example, one of the region's 2 Tianhuang-level sects, rivaling even Kanglan in prestige. For this year's ceremony, they had sent their finest protégé, a true Tianjiao specially groomed over decades by the sect's venerable ancestor. In the elders' estimation, this young genius was more than a match for any opponent, Yue Lingshuan of Kanglan included. Buoyed by confidence in his disciples' abilities, the Yuehua Patriarch now led a grand retinue of senior elders to the capital city, eager to greet the hero who had claimed first place in the Grand Southern Ceremony. When the Yuehua Patriarch and the high-ranking officials who had remained behind in the Holy Land finally emerged and caught sight of the delegation bound for the Southern Grand Ceremony, they froze in astonishment. Even the Holy Son of Yuehua and the Divine King, rank elders at his side, looked as though they'd been struck by calamity, faces drained of color, eyes haunted by some terrible memory. Did something catastrophic happen at the Grand Ceremony? The Patriarch murmured, baffled. He was the founder of the Holy Land. He could not linger in confusion. Drawing himself up, he cleared his throat and laid a steady hand on his disciple's shoulder. Luo Shan, what troubles you? Why do you all look so defeated? Didn't we emerge victorious this year? At the Patriarch's question, Luo Shan and the Divine Kings snapped out of their daze. Their thoughts flickered back to the Southern Grand Ceremony, above all to the moment Ye Cheng had appeared like a specter of war, cleaving the Kanglan Patriarch in 2 with a single, flawless strike and cutting down the soul-devouring cult's envoy without hesitation. The memory of that sword stroke still rang in their ears, and their victory now felt as hollow as a corpse's echo. Luo Shan's body trembled, and he hurriedly shook his head. Master, I've never claimed to have won the championship. Patriarch Yuehua studied him intently. If Luo Shan had truly defeated that peerless opponent, he would be worthy of the title Saint of Yuehua and could even challenge for the patriarchal seat. Yet as he gazed into Luo Shan's eyes, calm and guiltless, he found himself struggling to believe it. Could the gap between his disciple and the Kanglan saint really be that vast? Both had trained under his roof, and his own confidence in Luo Shan had run deep. How, then, could Luo Shan lose so decisively and still show no remorse? Piecing it together, Patriarch Yuehua's voice sharpened. Tell me, is the Kanglan saint truly that formidable? Has she mastered Kanglan's legendary magic, or unveiled some hidden art of that name? Is that why you're so disheartened? Luo Shan blinked in confusion. Saint Kanglan? Disheartened? He realized with relief that his master must be mistaken about the recent southern ceremony. Waving his hands, he hurried to clarify. Master, you've misunderstood. I didn't act like this because of Saint Kanglan, Luo Shan insisted. Saint Kanglan didn't even place in this battle. She's dead. Old ancestor Yuehua froze, his blood running cold. Saint Kanglan Yuelingxuan, that name alone carried legend. Her brother ranked among the top 10 on the spirit list. Even the Heavenly Emperor treated him with deference. And now she was dead, without so much as a whisper of warning? You're telling me there's been no word from the Kanglan Holy Land? No one claimed responsibility? I've heard nothing. His voice trembled. If his own disciple hadn't confirmed it, Yuehua might have dismissed the story as rumor. Yet the look on Luo Shan's face brooked no denial. The young man bowed deeply. Master, it's no wonder Kanglan Holy Land hasn't issued any response, Luo Shan said quietly. It wasn't just the saintess who was slaughtered. The entire Holy Land was destroyed. Yuehua staggered back. What? How is that possible? Kanglan Holy Land was one of the 3 great sacred lands, its power rivaling even Yuehua's own domain. To annihilate it utterly would require strength capable of leveling a sacred land at its roots. If someone possessed that might, the implications were too terrible to contemplate. The patriarch's heart pounded as dread coiled in his chest. If Kanglan could fall, what hope was there for anyone else? Listening to Luo Shan's explanation, Patriarch Yuehua gradually settled his racing heart. According to Luo Shan, the Gu family had nursed a long-standing grudge against Kanglan Holy Land, hence the disaster yesterday. It didn't strike him as the work of a bloodthirsty, murderous order, and he felt a measure of relief. Still, he couldn't hide his curiosity. The Gu family? He asked, brow creasing. What is their background? The name held no meaning for him. The Gu family's glory days had slipped into antiquity, so distant that even the southern reaches of the spiritual realm remembered them only in fragmented tales. Across the entire realm, perhaps only a handful of scholars could recite their history. Patriarch Yuehua had never encountered their name before, yet he didn't dwell on the gap in his knowledge. Powerful though they appeared, he quietly wondered if the Gu family's fortunes could truly stand the test of time. Kanglan Holy Land itself is a trifling matter, Patriarch Yuehua said, but the power backing the Kanglan Saintess is not to be underestimated. And with the Daluo Tiangong's volatile temperament, another elder added, it's only a matter of time before he comes down on the Gu family in full fury. Yuehua's eyes narrowed. Without meaning to, his gaze drifted toward the Han Qin Empire, a spark of excitement lighting his expression. His disciple's latest report had just arrived. Ye Cheng had slain an envoy of the soul-devouring sect, one bound by their own soul-binding arts. The soul-devouring sect posed an even greater threat than the Daluo Tiangong's faction, yet here was the Gu family, rising stronger than ever. Whether they would blaze as an eternal star or blaze out like a shooting comet depended entirely on one thing: their ability to survive the coming storm. If they fail, Yuehua murmured, all their glory will vanish overnight. Only then can we breathe easy. He leaned forward, rubbing his beard thoughtfully. And once they're brought low, we can carve up what's left of Kanglan Holy Land and reclaim the Mengyo Spring for ourselves. A hungry gleam of anticipation lit his eyes. Luo Shan leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. What if they actually survive? Patriarch Yuehua shook his head, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Survive? Against Daluo Tiangong and the soul-devouring sect? Those two alone could lay waste to the entire southern spirit realm. Even with Ye Cheng, an anomaly, it's hard to imagine anyone resisting that tide. He frowned, recalling the reports his disciples had brought in. Ye Cheng had not only scattered the soul-devouring sect's messenger, but done so with ruthless precision. Still, the patriarch went on, if he truly endures their onslaughts, then our worries vanish. We could lay down our arms, pledge fealty to him. A faint smile curved his lips, tinged with satisfaction. Meanwhile, the huge powers in the central spirit realm, those who lorded over everyone, should be the ones losing sleep. If Ye Cheng can withstand assaults from Daluo Tiangong and the soul-devouring sect, he must be formidable indeed. He may not yet rival a true Saint-Emperor faction, but the gap won't be vast. As word of their conversation spread, similar debates ignited across every southern strong. Old. Each house, each sect, found itself grappling with the same question. What if Ye Cheng survives? For a time, the Gu family stood unchallenged at the pinnacle of the southern spiritual domain. So when news of the latest spiritual list update drifted down south, few paid it any mind. Southern cultivators had never had any real presence on that list. No matter how strong the South became, it never produced a genius worthy of ranking. Their interest was, as always, firmly fixed on the Gu family's next move. Then the new spiritual ranking was announced, and the entire South fell silent. At the very top stood the evergreen god king, Ye Cheng. Disbelief rippled through the crowd. How could the Gu family's revered head, long thought to be an inscrutable sage beyond the reach of youthful ambition, also qualify as a rising prodigy on the spiritual list? Whispers filled the air. This is the pride of the spiritual domain? Our god king is too young to be an ancient monster, yet he's secured first place on the ranking? Even the skeptical Yuehua patriarch of the southern emperor realm, who had never thought much of the Gu family's prospects, felt his heartbeat quicken. But just as excitement threatened to boil over, it faded almost as quickly as it had flared. By the time word of the latest spirit ranking filtered down to the southern spiritual domain, 100 formidable auras had already gathered above its sea of clouds. One after another, fierce spirit vessels pierced the mist, racing southward at full speed, headed straight for the Han and Qin empires. Whispers ran like wildfire through the ranks of cultivators. The Gu family's catastrophe has come. Above the boundless sea of clouds, a fleet of spirit boats cleaved through the misty void. Dark, malevolent energies spread out beneath them, pressing down on every cultivator in the southern reaches of the spirit domain. Each struggled to catch a full breath. At the prow of the formation fluttered a radiant banner bearing the 4 characters Daluo Tiangong. It shone with imperial might. Not only did it announce the visitor's extraordinary rank, it was itself an imperial treasure. Its brilliance drew in spiritual energy from a 10,000-foot radius, suffusing the lead vessel with protective power and supernatural potency. 9 more spirit boats followed in precise formation. On each sat a Tianhuang realm sovereign, flanked by several Xuanhuang realm masters. In these southern skies, such a display marked the absolute pinnacle of power. Only those worthy of forging their own holy lands could muster such authority. By comparison, any single boat in this fleet was, at best, an auxiliary, its commander a capable cultivator, but far from the Empire's foremost champions. Is this the true might of Daluo Tiangong? In the southern reaches of the spiritual domain, cultivators gaped in disbelief. Before them stretched a formation beyond imagination, 9 heavenly emperors, dozens more at the mysterious emperor level. Such power alone could sweep every force in the southern region. Yet even as they reeled from that revelation, an even greater shock awaited. On a spirit vessel flying the Daluo Tiangong banner, Yuo Baifeng stepped onto the deck, flanked by 2 venerable elders. The first was the second palace master of Daluo Tiangong, the Daluo palace master himself, his bearing as unshakable as a mountain. Beside him stood the Yulong deputy palace master, another titan in the late Divine Emperor realm. Divine Emperor realm. 2 of them at once. A hush fell over the onlookers as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Were these the giants who held sway over the spiritual domain? And how could the so-called Holy Lands of Yuehua or Kanglan hope to compare with the central might of Daluo Tiangong? As the 2 divine emperors took their places by the banner, even the sky seemed to tremble at the authority they exuded, an authority that spelled doom for anyone foolish enough to stand against them. They had long whispered that when Ye Cheng laid waste to Kanglan Holy Land, he'd been flanked by a woman whose aura rivaled a divine emperor's. Rumor or not, it hardly mattered now. Yu Baifeng's vengeance force boasted not one, but two late-stage divine emperors, and reinforcements still to come. The Gu clan's days are numbered. The patriarch of Yuhua murmured as he stood atop the Holy Land's central terrace. Below him, the ranks of spirit vessels lifted off in grand formation, their sails ignited with runic light as they charted a course for the Han and Qin empires. The Gu family had ascended with staggering speed and would tumble even faster. They'd barely savored their triumph before the spirit realm would cast them out forever. Aboard the flagship spirit ship, Yue Baifeng's pulse thundered in his ears. Every recollection of past grievances coiled into a single burning purpose, to annihilate the Gu clan without mercy. From the deck he surveyed the southern cultivators below, their faces ghostly with dread. Two divine emperors had them quaking in their boots, yet they had no idea how many more divine emperor-level cultivators he'd brought along. A cold smile curved Yue Baifeng's lips. He pivoted and strode toward the cabin at the vessel's heart. There, behind thick bronze doors set with jade talismans, waited his deadliest allies. When those doors opened, the final chapter of the Gu family's arrogance would be written in blood and ruin. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath as the fleet surged onward, heralding an era of reckoning that none would escape. Ye Cheng's master and his uncle stood at the prow, guiding the squadron of spirit boats steadily onward. Yet in the central cabin, a final and most feared elder still waited in the shadows, the very man Gu's fiancé, Hua Lianyi, had personally invited. Though his power fell short of a Saint Emperor's, even the mighty Daluo Palace Master and the Jade Dragon Divine Emperor showed him the utmost respect. He had reached the absolute pinnacle of the Divine Emperor realm. One Divine Emperor is a legend, two in their late stage are invincible. As if that weren't enough, Yue Baifeng's other allies had summoned veteran elders from the Tianhuang realm. Faced with such an imposing lineup, Yue Baifeng's confidence swelled to arrogance. He fixed Ye Cheng with a cold stare and called out across the wind, "Ye Cheng, let your death and the destruction of your entire Gu clan stand as a tribute to Ling Xuan." Boom! A thunderous shockwave rippled through the sky as Yue Baifeng unleashed his will. The spirit boat fleet surged forward, cleaving the clouds in their wake. Soon they hovered above the Han Qin Empire's capital, its gates quaking, its people stricken with terror, as though the very end of the world had descended upon them. Chapter 4. Relief and Resentment. The Han Qin Empire's forces stood shaken on the plains outside Jianglin City. Rumors had spread that Yue Baifeng and his companions meant to settle old scores, and every soldier feared being caught in the crossfire. Yet, at dawn, the great fleet of Daluo Tiangong, resplendent with banners of white and gold, soared past the Han Qin encampments, not toward them, but straight for Jianglin City itself. Instantly, tension gave way to relief. The Han Qin troops exhaled as one. Inside the city walls, the Jiang family, long tied by marriage to the Gu household, felt their own dread dissolve. They had braced themselves to answer for the Gu clan's deeds. Now it seemed their worries had been groundless. Daluo Tiangong truly lives up to its reputation, murmured Elder Jiang Wei, watching the sky fill with the giant power's warships. A force of this magnitude, magnanimous and far-sighted, they've no desire to settle petty vendettas. His son, Jiang Ming, nodded vigorously. Exactly. Such grace. It couldn't be more different from the Gu family. Even with an evergreen god king at their helm, they nurse grudges and reap blood without a second thought. That sort of wanton slaughter only brings ruin upon oneself. A ripple of agreement swept through the Jiang clan. Many still remembered the day Ye Cheng had driven them from their ancestral estate on the city's eastern outskirts. They recalled, too, how coldly he'd treated them at last year's southern ceremony, barely sparing them a glance. Now, watching Daluo Tiangong's fleet anchor before the Gu family's gates, the Jiang relatives exchanged triumphant smiles. They felt vindicated. This was justice of a grander scale, far above the Gu clan's narrow pettiness. And as the city's gates began to open for the newcomers, the Jiang family stood ready to bask in the glow of Daluo Tiangong's favor, confident that at last they would be on the side of power and prosperity rather than shame and exile. "Sister, You won't escape death this time. You thought you'd married a good man, but you never expected to be murdered." The words cut through the chill morning air, spoken with gleeful malice by Jiang Baiwei. Before her stood Ye Cheng's sister, her fate sealed by a husband she thought she could trust. Jiang Baiwei's cruel satisfaction was mirrored by her father, Jiang Yunshan, who had long treated his daughter as little more than a pawn in his schemes. He had endured his own share of humiliation at Ye Cheng's hands, and now reveled in the Gu family's downfall, imagining how sweet revenge would taste. Ye Cheng himself had always kept the Jiang clan at arm's length, his expression indifferent. But beneath that calm mask burned a cold resentment. Today, that resentment hardened into hatred as he realized his beloved family was being used to settle old scores. High above the riverbank, God King Jiang watched the royal fleet fade into the misty dawn, a profound sorrow settling in his chest. He, too, had suffered humiliation at Ye Cheng's hands, but even that sting paled beside the anguish of witnessing the young man's current plight. When Ye Cheng first stepped into the realm of the God Kings, he dreamed of roaming from Han to Qin, venturing into the southern kingdoms, and exacting vengeance on all who had wronged him. Now, stronger than ever, he faced the unthinkable, being crushed beneath the colossal might of the God Emperor Giant. And God King Jiang could only watch in silent despair. God King Jiang stared at the smoldering ruins of the Gu estate, but instead of satisfaction, he felt a deep sorrow. "What good is the title of God King," he murmured to himself, "when before the true giants were nothing more than ants?" A heavy sigh escaped him. Not long ago, he'd regretted how far things had fallen between the Jiang and Gu families. Any hope of alliance had vanished. Yet now, as the Daluo Tiangong spirit boat tore through the clouded sky, a strange sense of relief washed over him. Had he made peace with the Gu, today's disaster would have spelled not only their ruin, but the complete annihilation of the Jiang clan. If Ye Cheng hadn't died here, he might have risen to greatness, the king whispered, and his 2 children, what a tragic loss. But his lament went unheeded. Jiang Yunshan, flanked by the clan's senior elders, led a contingent straight into the charred remains of the Gu compound, determined to witness their rival's downfall in person. And across the many realms of power beyond the Jiang, not a few shared the same hard-hearted sentiment. They weren't here to settle a petty family grudge like the Yuehua Holy Land. They came only to confirm the rumors. Once the Gu clan was truly destroyed, these sects would immediately dispatch envoys to claim the territories the Gu family once held. In other words, the old sphere of influence of Kanglan Holy Land. Within the ranks of Daluo Tiangong, exhilaration ran high. To them, every new arrival merely underscored the warning their triumph would send. If you dare challenge Daluo Tiangong, you will be crushed. They intended this message to echo not only through the southern lands, but across the entire spirit realm. Now, on the distant horizon, the dark outline of Jianglan City began to emerge. Standing proudly at the front was Yu Baifeng, and just behind him, the palace masters and the emperors, both the known and the secretive, watched with gleaming eyes. One of the palace masters raised his voice so all could hear. "As of today, the Gu clan is struck from the records. Let the spirit realm remember this. Whoever claims alliance with Daluo Tiangong must never presume it can be insulted or ignored." Chapter 87. Just outside Jianglan City in the Han Qin Empire, every army commander grounded their banners as the distant glimmer of Daluo Tiangong's spirit boat fleet crested the horizon. Nobody dared march forward into that gathering storm. They had come to witness the Gu family's fall, not to share in its ruin. And yet, amid the frozen ranks, one lone figure advanced without hesitation. If Ye Cheng were here, he would have recognized her at once. Fairy Lu, one of the twin pavilion masters of Xianxia Pavilion, whom he'd briefly known at the southern ceremony. Gone were her ornate pearl hairpins. In their place hung a single green skirt that billowed around her like mist. Though dressed plainly, she remained breathtaking. Her clear, determined eyes never left the city walls ahead. News had just arrived that Daluo Tiangong's armada was bearing down on Jianglan, and Fairy Lu had cast aside the safety of Xianxia Pavilion to stand beside the Gu family, fully aware that her power alone might be but a drop against the coming tide. Anyone who emerged from the spirit boat could have slain her 1,000 times over, and she knew it. Yet Fairy Lu had made her choice. If the Gu family hadn't intervened at the southern ceremony, Xianxia Pavilion's fate would have been sealed long ago. It was the God King of the Yanlong dynasty's arrogance that doomed her and her disciples to disaster, and she could never forget the Gu family's kindness. Back at Xianxia Pavilion, Fairy Lu handed over its affairs to Fairy Qin and confined Bai Yueling in the inner court, determined to keep her disciple from a reckless, fatal escape. With her duty entrusted, she set her heart on one thing, reaching Zhonglin City to face death. Just as Fairy Lu soared into sight of Zhonglin's walls, a sudden buzz split the air. A rip in the heavens tore open directly above the city gate. They had arrived moments before the delegation from Daluo Tiangong, an unexpected shock even for Fairy Lu. Through the widening fissure stepped a lone figure, a young woman clad in plain white robes, her sword hanging at her side, her bearing cool and unearthly. She paused, took in the scene below, and frowned in puzzlement. "Is this where Ye Cheng is?" she asked, her voice clear and steady. The air above Zhonglin City felt stale. Spiritual energy here was all but exhausted. Perched on a shifting sea of clouds, Luo Shenyue frowned as she surveyed the gray skyline. Once the undisputed #1 cultivator on the spiritual rankings, she had braved hostile territories to confirm a single piece of intelligence. Ye Cheng, the Gu family's legendary prodigy, was said to reside within these walls. Summoning her aura, Luo Shenyue let her voice ring out. Every syllable carried on currents of power until it echoed through every street and courtyard. "Young Master Ye Cheng, if you are in Zhonglin City, I, Luo Shenyue, have come to pay my respects." Her words hit like thunder. In an instant, the entire city fell silent. Ordinary townsfolk quailed in place. Even seasoned cultivators dared not draw a breath. The rumor mill was already churning with fear of Daluo Palace's oncoming storm. Now this fearsome figure floated above them as well. Inside the sprawling Gu estate, dozens of heads snapped upward. The family's elders exchanged worried glances. Luo Shenyue? They had anticipated a mighty enemy, but none had ever mentioned her name. At the front gate, guards trembled on their posts. In the cultivation hall beyond the estate walls, Ye Cheng sat cross-legged before a jade altar. The summons drew him from meditation. He opened his eyes, calm but alert. Glancing around at his equally puzzled brothers and cousins, he rose to his feet. "All right," he said quietly, "let's see what this guest wants." With that, Ye Cheng stepped forward and unleashed his own spiritual force. In a single, effortless motion, he lifted himself into the air, ready to meet Luo Shenyue face to face above the city she had swept into silence. Ye Cheng sensed immediately that his opponent's cultivation was anything but weak. She'd already reached the pinnacle of the Xuan King realm. In the entire Gu family, only he and Patriarch Xuanhuang could hope to stand against someone of her caliber. He turned his gaze to the figure clad in silver armor, drifting on the sea of clouds. "Who is she?" he murmured to himself. "I've never laid eyes on her before." Below him, Luo Shenyue stared back with equal curiosity. Her dark eyes flickered with appreciation as she took in his appearance. He was young, but remarkably well-built, handsome in a way few fighters were. "Not bad at all," she admitted under her breath. Fingers poised at her sword's hilt, Luo Shenyue was about to issue her challenge when a thunderous boom ripped through the air. An immense, crushing pressure, dark as an endless void, swept over the valley, snuffing out the words on her lips before she could utter them. "What in the world?" she whispered, her voice trembling as the shockwave rattled her to her core. Only moments ago, she'd activated her clan's teleportation array, tearing a hole through space to land in Zhonglin City. She'd been wholly unconcerned with the Gu family's affairs. Her sole purpose was to face the person who'd supplanted her. Now, confronted by this overwhelming force, she had no choice but to wonder, who else had come to challenge her? Ye Cheng's goal was simple, to see if this newcomer was truly worthy of toppling her from the spirit rankings. Even now, he could feel the terrifying aura of true emperors and the colossal might of god emperors bearing down on him. Luo Shenyue glanced at him in surprise. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "I'm not here for you." With a blur, Ye Cheng vanished and reappeared high above the sea of clouds. Far off, 10 spirit ships tore through the mist, and with them rose a formless evil so vast it loomed like a black mountain, pressing down on the sky above Jianglin City. Cultivators below struggled to draw breath beneath its oppressive weight. On each spirit ship, Emperor tier figures radiated rippling chi, their combined power coalescing into a five-colored canopy that stretched majestically across the heavens. Both the God Emperor's might and the malevolent specter surged upward in a single, awe-inspiring display. This was the legendary force of Daluo Tiangong, an authority so overwhelming that its very presence was enough to send all who opposed it trembling in fear. My goodness! A hush fell over the cultivators of Jianglin City. The most formidable figures they'd ever seen here were the venerable God King of the Jiang clan, and at most, the young God King Ye Cheng of the Gu family. Never in their wildest dreams had they imagined so many Emperor-tier powerhouses assembling in their midst. This was no mere crisis. It was a calamity. Even the Xuan Emperor, lurking in the shadows of the Gu estate, felt a chill tighten in her chest. She had already warned Gu Yecheng to evacuate the clan's core members, or at least let him spirit away the children while she covered their retreat. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, she'd urged. Yet with this unprecedented force pouring forth from the Daluo Tiangong, escape seemed impossible. She couldn't hold them off alone. Suppressing a frustrated sigh, she muttered under her breath, "Run? Do they really think they can outrun the might of the Daluo Tiangong?" Her gaze snapped upward, just as two towering figures, Master and Deputy Master of the late God Queen tier, stepped through the rift in the sky. The very air around them crackled with power. Steeling herself against the overwhelming pressure, the Xuan Emperor set her jaw and whispered, "If we must, then we fight to the last breath. Your life once belonged to me. Now I return it." Emperor Xuan fell silent, but the fire in his eyes spoke of unwavering resolve. Even as he pressed the 10 spirit ships of Daluo Tiangong into position, cutting off Jianglin Cheng and hemming in the Gu estate, he felt a new, oppressive force gathering overhead. High above the sea of clouds, a massive pillar of inky black light descended, exuding a deathful, the aura so overwhelming that even from a distance it felt as if one's very soul might be swallowed. With a thunderous crash, it slammed into the formation, shoving the 10 spirit vessels of Daluo Tiangong backward. When the darkness parted, a single figure remained, an elderly man in flowing black robes, his presence so formidable that every spirit emperor aboard the ships gazed upon him in panic. God Emperor, the perfected one. Inside the main hall of the Gu estate, Gu Yecheng's heart thundered in his chest. At his side, his faithful lieutenant Xuan Huang went pale, fear etched into every line of his face. Together they watched, powerless, as the new threat made itself known. Gu Yecheng's heart skipped a beat the moment the black-robed elder materialized before him. The aura radiating from the newcomer was every bit as powerful as Xuan Huang's at her peak, and that meant he'd reached the very summit of the God Emperor realm. "Soul-devouring ghost, you actually came?" Xuan Huang's voice trembled with equal parts surprise and suspicion. "Does the Gu family bear a grudge against you?" Before the black-robed master could reply, a resonant voice boomed out from the Daluo Heavenly Palace's main spirit vessel, echoing across Jianglin City. Every cultivator in the streets, indeed even those observing the clash from afar, fell silent, senses straining. Then, as if to punctuate the announcement, an immense wave of energy rolled from the spirit boat, no weaker than that of the black-robed figure. In an instant, everyone realized the truth. The Daluo Heavenly Palace had dispatched yet another titan, also standing in the perfection realm of the God Emperor. Shock and awe rippled through the spectators. 2 God Emperors, each harboring untold power, were now on Jianglin City's sacred grounds. The battle that was about to unfold would reshape the fates of everyone present. Chapter 88. Above the sea of clouds, a colossal figure suddenly materialized, an aura of such overwhelming power that every cultivator below involuntarily drew in a sharp breath. Even the fighters from the southern Holy Land snapped to attention, eyes widening in disbelief. To most southern disciples, his features were unfamiliar. Yet to anyone versed in the true powers of the spirit realm, there could be no doubt. This was the Misty Moon Divine Emperor, third elder of the famed Hua clan, a rare Saint Emperor lineage. Though he stood at the peak of Divine Emperor perfection, The Misty Moon Divine Emperor had been personally schooled by a Saint Emperor-level master, making him far stronger than any ordinary Divine Emperor. One of the Holy Land's veterans, voice trembling with awe, muttered, "Daluo Tiangong actually invited the Misty Moon Divine Emperor to preside over this. Truly astounding." Around him, cultivators exchanged anxious glances, first toward Jiang Lincheng, then toward the grand estate of the Gu family, now firmly under Ye Cheng's name. With the Misty Moon Divine Emperor arrayed against them, the Gu clan's chances of survival seemed to vanish in an instant. Moreover, all eyes instinctively turned to the black-robed elder whom even the Emperor of the Moon had nicknamed the Old Ghost, the dreaded Soul Devourer. Southern cultivators hardly recognize that title, but call him the Emperor of Soul Devouring, and every practitioner in the spiritual realm would shudder. He had risen from the legendary soul-devouring sect, and his reputation for ruthless destruction was universal. The Kanglan Holy Land, among other mighty powers, had fallen before his wrath more than once. Yet his most notorious deed occurred a century ago, when he utterly annihilated the Mountain Sect. That sect even boasted its own formidable God Emperor, but he proved no match. Under the swirling haze of the Old Ghost's soul-devouring mist, the entire sect bled out, their life forces cruelly harvested, and the fallen God Emperor himself was consumed as fuel for that unholy mist. Ever since, the name Soul Devouring had echoed like a death knell across the spirit realm. And now, to the shock of every onlooker, that fearsome God Emperor had returned. At the Emperor of Longyue's prompt, the soul-devouring God Emperor sneered, fixing Jiang Lincheng with a cruel gleam in his eyes. This scion of the Gu clan dared to slaughter the troops our sect had arranged with, and on top of that, he slew our soul-binding envoy. Had I not been informed, perhaps I might have let it pass. But now that I know, do you really expect me to let him walk away unpunished? If he spared the Gu family here, what would become of the soul-devouring sect's authority? At the God Emperor's cold decree, the Jiang family's onlookers, who had once resented the Gu clan's aloofness and regretted being harsh to Jiang Lianshin, exhaled in relief. Seeing the Gu family now surrounded by 4 God Emperors bent on retribution, they felt nothing but gratitude and a grim delight. Jiang Yunshan curled his lips in a sneer. The Gu family's young lord, God King Ye Cheng, really is something else. Talented, and a real troublemaker, too. A disdainful voice cut through the clamor. High above Jianglin City, on the rolling expanse known as the Sea of Clouds, Ye Cheng surveyed the approaching legions of enemies. Behind him, Luo Shenyue still staggered in confusion, but Ye Cheng paid him no mind. With a single decisive step, he surged forward through the mist, then, as if stepping out of the clouds themselves, materialized before the city's gates, confronting the assembled armies at a distance. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Well, I'll be damned. He actually came out of his own accord. Even the most formidable cultivators outside Jianglin City exchanged surprised glances. Among them, the soul-devouring Emperor's eyes gleamed. He detected a fiercely condensed divine thought radiating from Ye Cheng's core. Though its true strength remained unknown, he was certain that devouring and refining this young man would empower his soul-devouring mist, perhaps granting him the breakthrough he'd long craved into the Saint Emperor realm. Greed flared in the soul-devouring Emperor's gaze. Yet across the field, Yue Baifeng's excitement burned even brighter. The instant Ye Cheng appeared, Baifeng recognized him, the very man he blamed for the death of Yue Lingshuan. A cruel smile curved Baifeng's lips. At last, it seemed, his chance for vengeance had arrived. Yue Baifeng's eyes went bloodshot. "It was you who killed Lingshuan?" he roared, murder in his voice. Before he could take another breath, Ye Cheng held up a hand. In an instant, a single palm shot outward with such concentrated divine power that it cracked the very air, an ear-splitting boom rippling through the courtyard. The force drove him straight at Yue Baifeng in one inexorable surge. Yue Baifeng's face blanched. He had never expected Ye Cheng to dare attack under the watchful eyes of Daluo Tiangong's 2 palace masters and a host of emperor-rank cultivators. For a heartbeat, everyone stood frozen in disbelief. Yue Baifeng, caught utterly off guard by the unstoppable onslaught, barely had a moment to react before Ye Cheng's palm was upon him. It would have been lethal, if not for a flash of movement beside him. From the spirit boat moored at the edge of the pavilion, the nearest Deluo Tiangong Tianhuang sprang forward, intercepting Ye Cheng's strike. He materialized in front of Yue Baifeng in the blink of an eye, bracing himself to take the full force of the blow. That instantaneous defense saved Yue Baifeng's life, but it did nothing to quell the shock reverberating through the assembled masters. No one had expected Ye Cheng to make such a brazen move, and certainly not so swiftly. As the dust settled around them, the tension in the air was palpable. A single misstep now could ignite a war among the heavens themselves. Elder Yunan's voice dropped into a low growl as he channeled his spiritual power into one hand, tracing a brilliant light seal and hurling it straight at Ye Cheng's palm. The seal's radiance met Ye Cheng's condensed palm force in midair with a blinding flash, where for a single heartbeat it seemed Yunnan had succeeded in stopping the assault. "Excellent!" someone shouted. "It's Elder Yunnan!" roared the assembled warriors of the great Luo Heavenly Palace. Yue Baifeng, who had thought all was lost, let out a shaky breath of relief and cheered, utterly grateful that the mighty elder had come to his aid. But the moment of triumph was cut brutally short. Crack! A dull, sickening crack echoed across the arena. Elder Yunnan's lips curved into a victorious grin, only to freeze before it could fully form. Ye Cheng's palm strike shattered the radiant seal like thin glass, then drove straight through Yunnan's chest. A single blow ruptured his lungs, his internal organs and dantian collapsed instantly. Though the elder still stood upright, his life force flickered and died in that heartbeat. A perfect emperor, laid low by Ye Cheng's palm. Yue Baifeng's relief turned to horror as he watched the savior who'd appeared out of nowhere be cut down in an instant. A crackle of energy, a gust of wind, then Elder Yunnan's final, choking gasp. Blood spurted from his lips, drenching Yue Baifeng, and moments later, the elder's body collapsed into a shapeless mound of mud. The aftermath was gruesome. Yue Baifeng's angelic glow was replaced by agony as he staggered under grievous injuries, a price paid with the life of a perfect emperor. The whole clash had been over in a heartbeat, yet every second had stretched into an eternity. Only moments before, Yue Baifeng had managed a grateful smile, only to cough up blood almost at once. His vision swam, the very core of his Tao shattered into countless, irretrievable fragments. Worse than the physical pain was the sight of Ye Cheng standing before him, utterly unmoved. The young man's composure was chilling, as if slaying a perfect emperor were no greater achievement than drinking a pee of water. "Who do you think you are?" Yue Baifeng rasped, voice trembling. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Ye Cheng's gaze was steady, his tone level and cold. "I am the one who just ended your emperor's reign." Those words hit Yue Baifeng like a thunderclap, driving the final nails into the coffin of his splintered heart, and snuffing out any hope of reconstruction. The cultivators watching the fight, along with even the high-ranking figures of Daluo Tiangong, were no better off than Yue Baifeng. They stared in stunned silence at the fallen Elder Yunnan, a master who had reached the very pinnacle of the Emperor realm. How could he have died so effortlessly under a single palm strike from Ye Cheng? High above, Luo Shenyue hovered in midair, utterly speechless. "Did I really just challenge him?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Chapter 89. High atop the rolling sea of clouds, Ye Cheng stood like a towering monument, his bearing at once serene and awe-inspiring. Whispers rippled through the gathered cultivators. This was the man who had felled an emperor with a single palm strike. The legendary sword immortal had truly arrived in their world. Not far off, Luo Shenyue watched him in stunned silence. Though she was a devoted martial artist, she was no fool. She knew her own limits, and she knew that even the most formidable emperors were beyond her reach. Yet here was proof that her standards of power were still far too low. Elder Yunnan, a scion of Daluo Tiangong, whose unique techniques surpassed those of ordinary heavenly emperors, had fallen instantly to Ye Cheng's palm. Even he had not withstood it. What realm of power had Ye Cheng achieved? Luo Shenyue felt her heart pound. A new summit of martial prowess stood before her. Only an early-stage divine emperor could pull that off. Luo Shenyue's eyes widened in disbelief. Nearby, the palace master of Daluo Palace frowned, his gaze fixed on Ye Cheng with barely concealed hostility. "He isn't even a true divine emperor yet," he murmured, but he's practically on the cusp. Don't let him linger, the palace master whispered under his breath. At his side, the deputy palace master of Yulong Palace inclined his head, a cold glint in his eyes. No wonder he raised Kanglan Holy Land and dared to strike our soul-binding envoy. His power is extraordinary. Not far off, the soul-devouring divine emperor narrowed his eyes, a predatory gleam flickering in his gaze. Like the others, he'd witnessed Ye Cheng's devastating strength and quietly vowed to eliminate the threat. True, Ye Cheng had displayed formidable talent, but in the eyes of these grand masters, a mere aspiring divine emperor was still well within their reach. Even if Ye Cheng was a monster whose power rivaled a mid-stage divine emperor, so what? Their side still boasted 2 late-stage divine emperors and a pair of perfect-stage divine emperors. With a lineup like that, handling Ye Cheng should have been a straightforward matter. Just at that moment, a soft rush of air swept through the arena, swish, and a lone figure appeared, stepping onto the sea of clouds beside Ye Cheng. The instant she materialized, every eye in the audience snapped toward her. That's... Even Longyou and Tunhun, the 2 perfect-stage divine emperors, narrowed their eyes as they recognized her. A cold gleam sparked in their gazes. It was Xuanhuang herself, yet she wore a delicate veil that concealed her features. She had just rebuilt her body and taken on a new life. Though Ye Cheng assured her there was no harm in revealing herself, Xuanhuang still feared that exposing her presence so openly might invite unnecessary complications. Since Ye Cheng did not insist otherwise, she chose to keep her true identity hidden beneath the veil. Even though she still hid her true form, the moment Xuanhuang's aura trembled through the air, every eye in the arena snapped to attention. Her power wasn't yet fully restored, but she had once stood at the very pinnacle of the divine emperor realm. That surging, majestic presence was unmistakable. Another divine emperor, right here, someone gasped. Is the Gu clan really hiding a second divine emperor? Murmurs spread like wildfire. Monks who'd rushed in after hearing rumors gaped at one another. They'd assumed Ye Cheng was the clan's ultimate stronghold. Now it seemed he'd been keeping an even greater weapon in reserve. Incredible, just incredible, cultivators throughout the Han-Chin Empire whispered among themselves. None were more stunned than the Zhang family, especially Zhang Yunshan and Zhang Baiwei. They'd believed the Gu clan was on its last legs. Yet here Ye Cheng stood, unfazed, backed by a powerhouse who could rival the heavens. It's only one divine emperor, someone scoffed. Even with Ye Cheng, that makes 2 divine emperors. No big deal. But in that instant, the balance of power in this arena, and perhaps across the entire empire, had shifted. It won't turn the world upside down, whispers rippled through the gathered Zhang family members. Some tried to rationalize the crisis, others sought only to reassure themselves, but no one else even noticed their concerns. Above the sea of clouds, Ye Cheng fixed his gaze on the Xuan Emperor's sudden appearance. His heart thumped in gratitude. He sent a silent transmission. Fellow Taoist Xuan Emperor, thank you. Any cultivator with the Xuan Emperor's power could have slipped away just as easily as she had arrived. From outward appearances, Ye Cheng's prospects were bleak. He was trapped, surrounded by enemies. It would have made perfect sense for her to depart now, citing their agreement. After all, she had explicitly stated that should she encounter an impossible crisis, she would not hesitate to leave him to fend for himself. Yet here she stood, choosing to stay and side with the Gu family. Even the deputy palace master of Daluo Tiangong, an unparalleled powerhouse in his own right, might have posed a challenge to her. The situation before them was dire enough to overwhelm even the Xuan Emperor, and by all reason she could have excused herself. But she did not. Resolute and unwavering, the Xuan Emperor raised her head and faced the oncoming storm alongside Ye Cheng and his kin. This gesture of friendship moved Ye Cheng to his core. There's no need for thanks, he replied quietly. We made this pact from the start. I'll hold them off, buy you time. You and your wife, along with the rest of your clan, must leave immediately. Emperor Xuan's voice rippled through their minds, calm and resolute. Although her wounds still ached and her current strength didn't match that of the 2 palace masters from Daluo Tiangong, she knew she had hidden reserves. If she unleashed her trump cards in a desperate, all-out confrontation, she could reclaim the full might of a divine emperor in short order. It might not be enough to win outright, but it would certainly secure the precious moments the Gu family needed to escape. On the Deluo Tiangong side, the palace masters staggered back to their senses, finally recovering from the shock of Emperor Xuan's sudden arrival. The oppressive aura of true imperial power pressed down upon them like a physical force. The lead palace master curled his lip in a disdainful sneer as he looked at Ye Cheng. His contempt was as plain as daylight. "I thought you still had some trump cards up your sleeve. It turns out it was only this ability? You're just a divine emperor. Do you really believe you can protect him?" With disdain in his voice, the Daluo palace master stepped forward and struck at Xuanhuang. The others, even the soul-devouring divine emperor, held their ground but refused to intervene. They quietly parted to form a ring around Ye Cheng and Xuanhuang, cutting off every escape route. This was sheer, unchallenged power. The Daluo palace master's confidence, bolstered by a late-stage divine queen's blessing, made him certain he could overwhelm two opponents at once. "Gu Daoyo, fall back," he ordered. "Find an opening. I'll deal with him." Xuanhuang's face went pale, but she braced herself and moved to shield Ye Cheng. Before she could act, however, Ye Cheng stepped out in front of her. "Don't worry about him, Daoyo Xuanhuang," he said, a confident smile curving his lips. "Leave this to me." His eyes flickered with determination as he faced the advancing palace master. Ye Cheng showed no trace of fear, only a barely concealed glint of fierce determination. Within his mind's eye, 4 king-grade divine swords hovered in perfect formation, effortlessly responding to the Jushian sword array he had mastered. With but a single thought, he could unleash its full destructive power. Just today, he had reforged 3 of those 4 king-tier weapons, using the rare materials his son, Gu Qingchen, had retrieved from the secret realm. Anchored by these 4 supreme blades and fueled by Ye Cheng's own Chaos Suo, ored body, the immortal execution sword formation now stood at the pinnacle of martial might. And yet, the palace master of Daluo Tiangong before him, only in the late divine queen stage, was hardly worthy of the formation's ultimate killing technique. Ye Cheng had already dealt with far stronger opponents, like Na Longyu and the soul-devouring divine emperor, both perfected divine emperors, without resorting to his system's full power. To call upon the immortal execution sword formation in its entirety against this adversary would be nothing more than overkill. Since acquiring his formidable system, Ye Cheng had yet to meet an opponent deserving of his all-out effort. Ye Cheng squared off against the Lord of Daluo Palace, a cultivator 3 realms his senior in the spirit realm of the Queen of Gods. A long-dormant fighting spirit stirred in him. Without the Jushian sword formation at his disposal, he wondered just how far his own strength could carry him. Softly, he murmured, "Let's see what I'm truly capable of," and took a single deliberate step forward, closing the distance between them. The palace master's lips curved into a cruel sneer. "You haven't the slightest clue what life or death really means," he taunted. Murderous intent gleamed in his eyes. "Since you're so eager to die, allow me to grant your wish." In one fluid motion, he drew his blood-red scimitar. Spirit energy crackled along its blade as he swung it in a graceful, sorrowful arc, like a sliver of a blood moon slicing through the sky. The crescent-shaped slash tore toward Ye Cheng at blinding speed. Everyone present held their breath, certain his defense would shatter, and with it his life. But as the moonlit blade descended, there was a sharp, metallic crack. Kacha! And the wave of killing intent evaporated midair. To every spectator's astonishment, Ye Cheng stood unharmed. He hadn't tapped into any secret cultivation technique or spirit art, yet not a scratch marred his robes. A tense silence fell. Now, all eyes were fixed on him, wondering just how far his hidden power would reach. Ye Cheng summoned a surge of spiritual power and wove it into a shimmering shell of sword chi around himself. The incoming blade light, lethal enough to fell an ordinary god emperor, rushed in without warning. The instant it struck his barrier, it shattered as if a cleaver had slammed against a masterfully forged blade, splitting into 2 pieces and dispersing like crumbling tofu between heaven and earth. What? Chapter 90. Ye Cheng's protective sword chi flared to life, effortlessly dissipating the onslaught of blade light hurled at him. Even the gathered monks, observers of this fierce duel, and the Daluo Palace Master himself stared in stunned silence. He had held back some of his true power, yet no one understood better than he did how destructive his sword essence could be at full strength. By all rights, that strike should have gravely wounded Ye Cheng if it hadn't outright killed him. And yet, here he stood, unscathed. A cold smile curved Ye Cheng's lips. Is that really the best you can do? How disappointing. Rage flickered across the Daluo Palace Master's face. He let out a furious laugh, then roared as he swept back his sleeve. With a single, thunderous clang of steel against air, 9 successive echoes rang out like bell chimes in the heavens. Behind him, 9 long swords materialized, their blades glowing a fierce, blood-red hue. They revolved in perfect unison, forming a deadly wheel of blades. "Behold," the Palace Master thundered, voice vibrating through the clearing, "the Daluo knife wheel." "That's the imperial divine weapon the Daluo Palace Master is famed for," someone murmured in awe. "A 9-layer blade wheel," another whispered back. "Each ring is a mid-grade imperial divine weapon. Together, they rival a 5th-grade blade high-level divine armament." A tense hush fell over the assembled cultivators. By unleashing this weapon, the Palace Master made it clear he meant business. With a disdainful glare, Daluo Palace Master studied Ye Cheng's face, searching for any hint of fear. But Ye Cheng stood utterly still, his calm, unreadable expression betraying nothing. "I'd like to see you this composed next time," the Palace Master hissed under his breath, and with a flick of his sleeve, he set his plan in motion. Swoosh! 9 tiers of blood-red scimitars converged into a spinning wheel of blades. Infused with potent spiritual energy, the wheel carved through the misty expanse above the sea of clouds, leaving a streak of crimson light in its wake as it darted straight for Ye Cheng. Wherever the colossal blade wheel swept, the sea of clouds fractured in midair, the void itself groaning as if rent by the divine weapon of a mighty god-emperor. In a heartbeat, the spinning wheel bore down on Ye Cheng, its razor edges aimed dead on. Clang! Bones and flesh snapped under the impact, yet, to everyone's shock, Ye Cheng did not crumble. At the very instant before destruction, he gathered his spiritual power into a single blistering swordlight and rammed it straight into the Daluo blade wheel. Clang, clang, clang! Above the shattered clouds, sparks flew as swordlight met blade. The thunderous roar of metal against iron echoed across the sky, leaving every onlooker breathless. By transforming his spirit into a living sword, Ye Cheng unleashed a cascade of brilliant arcs, wild, chaotic energies that seemed capable of toppling mountains and reshaping rivers. Against him stood the Daluo Palace Master, his deadly wheel humming with murderous intent. And yet the two stood locked in impossible equilibrium, swordlight and blade wheel matched blow for blow, neither yielding an inch. Under Ye Cheng's impenetrable defense, the Lord of Daluo Palace couldn't get his blade within 3 feet of him. Each time the great knife wheel spun toward Ye Cheng, brilliant swordlight flared and drove it back. "I must be dreaming," one of the monks whispered. "This Gu family god king is absurdly powerful. He defeated the palace lord's great knife wheel without breaking a sweat? Is he only a god king?" another murmured. "With strength like that, he might as well be a god emperor." "A monster," a third breathed. "Nothing short of a monster." All around them, the assembled monks stood frozen in astonishment. Sweat beaded on the Lord of Daluo Palace's brow. Facing Ye Cheng on equal footing might flatter Ye Cheng, but for the palace lord it was a bitter humiliation. He had transcended 3 realms of cultivation and unleashed his supreme divine weapon, and still could not fell this young swordsman. Then face oblivion! With a roar that shook the temple walls, the Lord of Daluo Palace spat a life-filled blood arrow. Charged with spiritual power, the crimson bolt struck his summoned knife wheel as it clattered back to his hand. In that instant, the blade drank deeply of the life essence, its edges glowing with renewed malevolence. Buzz! Divine light and a murderous aura erupted from the Daluo knife wheel, soaring into the air before surging straight at Ye Cheng. From the ramparts of Daluo Palace, its master fixed him in his sights, channeling divine thought and power to lock onto Ye Cheng's position. Even if Ye Cheng tried to evade, the Lord of Daluo Palace was ready to unleash the knife wheel again and pursue him in an instant. But Ye Cheng didn't flinch or dodge. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and let out a soft, regretful sigh. Still not enough to take down a god queen on my own, he murmured. He could intercept the palace master's secret technique. It wouldn't stop the attack completely, but he could withstand the blow. Yet without the Zhuxian sword formation, his strength peaked at mid-stage god emperor. Against a true god queen, that gap was fatal. Zhuxian sword formation, activate! Ye Cheng roared. Immediately, the air around him shimmered. Brilliant azure light snapped into being, countless sword silhouettes materializing in a perfect, coiling formation. The Zhuxian sword formation had awakened. Whoosh! 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 Behind him, Ye Cheng channeled his spiritual power, and 4 brilliant sword lights erupted from the ground like dragons of pure light, ascending into the sky. Their energies rippled outward, weaving together into a vast, deadly formation. In that instant, the air crackled with sword chi, a frigid gleam slicing through the battlefield as the aura of slaughter spread in all directions. 3 colossal figures, among them the dreaded soul-devouring god emperor, stood at a distance, watching in stunned silence. Their faces drained of color as they sensed a genuine threat emanating from that formation. "What kind of array is this?" the god emperor murmured, eyes narrowing. "The immortal execution sword array? Such a dramatic name." Closer to the fray, the Daluo Palace Master felt the full weight of the array's power. The killing intent hung in the air like a noose, fixating on him alone. He stared at the 4 sword beams, majestic, terrifying, and yet, in his cold assessment, nothing more than 4 king-grade swords. Even so, he knew Ye Cheng's reputation for ingenuity and ferocity all too well. Underestimating him would be a grave mistake. The Daluo Palace Master ground his teeth, voice blazing with defiance. "I refuse to believe that you, just a god king, can shake the heavens themselves." With a thunderous roar, his treasured Daluo blade wheel swung to life, streaking through the air like a blood-red comet. It smashed headlong into Ye Cheng's immortal slaying sword formation. But Ye Cheng stood unmoved, a cold smile playing on his lips. "As you wish." In the next heartbeat, the sky above the formation seemed to tear open. Thousands of argent sword lights shot forth like a meteor shower, each blade howl striking the crimson wheel with relentless precision. This was the weapon the Palace Master had refined over countless years, yet it barely withstood a single onslaught. Within moments, the Daluo blade wheel quaked violently. Under the horrified gasps of the onlookers, its surface cracked, collapsing into a whirling orb of spirit energy, and then erupted in a blinding flash. The Palace Master staggered back, spitting blood onto the stone floor. He stared at Ye Cheng, eyes wide with shock and disbelief, as the dust of his annihilated weapon drifted around them. How can your strength be so overwhelming?" the Palace Master of Daluongong nearly bellowed, disbelief coloring his voice. "And yet your cultivation is only at the God King level." Chapter 91. A hushed stillness settled over the mountaintop. Far above the sea of clouds, the Zhuxian sword formation blazed with an eerie, inexorable light. Countless gleaming blades of energy sliced through the sky like cold celestial rivers, filling the air with a palpable menace. Every pair of eyes in the assembly fixed on the heart of the formation, where flickering fragments of spirit energy drifted, like fireflies caught in a storm. Those drifting shards were all that remained of the Daluo blade wheel, an imperial-grade spirit weapon the Daluo Palace Master had painstakingly refined over years. Yet before the might of Ye Cheng's sword formation, the blade wheel proved as fragile as paper. In less than a dozen breaths, the relentless storm of swordlight tore it to pieces. The Daluo Palace Master's face went ashen. He staggered backward, blood trickling from his lips. Astonished horror burned in his eyes as he glared up at Ye Cheng. "That brat's using forbidden arts. Don't hold anything back," he roared. At the sight of the Daluo Palace Master's catastrophic loss, even the proud Yulong Vice Palace Master could no longer remain composed. Beside him, Longyo and Tunhun, the 2 great lords of the Divine Emperor Perfection realm, exchanged grim, determined looks. The battle had clearly tilted in Ye Cheng's favor, and now every power present braced to strike. 3 towering Divine Emperor cultivators descended in unison, hurtling straight toward the Zhuxian sword formation that Ye Cheng had erected. But having learned from his previous encounter, the Daluo Palace Master held back. Rather than charging headlong into the deadly array, the trio halted just outside its perimeter, and unleashed a withering barrage of spiritual weapons and secret techniques, hammering the formation from every side. The sound of clashing energies jolted the Daluo Palace Master back to alertness. At his elbow, Vice Palace Master Yulong leaned forward, voice low and eager. "Brother, be patient," he urged. "This boy's sword formation is unlike anything we've seen. If we capture him alive and force him to reveal its workings, the reward will far exceed the value of your Daluo knife wheel." Yulong's words sparked a greedy light in the Daluo Palace Master's eyes. No longer content to simply destroy Ye Cheng, he now saw him as a potential treasure trove of arcane secrets. Around them, the so-called family elders, whom Yu Baifeng and his friends had invited, ostensibly to lend support but actually just to gawk at the spectacle, grew equally restless. Whispers of envy and ambition rippled through their ranks as they eyed Ye Cheng, eager for a piece of whatever power lay hidden within his mysterious formation. Ye Cheng's power was truly fearsome. If they could capture him, they'd gain far more than just the Zuxian sword formation. His cultivation methods, and perhaps his very life, would be an invaluable prize. Palace Master Daluo, forcing down his anger over the destruction of his spirit weapon, charged into the battle alongside the others. Even the Tianhuang Xuanhuangs, spurred on by Deputy Palace Master Yulong's rallying words, paused at the edge of the fray. 4 divine emperors already had Ye Cheng surrounded, and they knew better than to rush in recklessly. They were well aware of their own limits. After all, Ye Cheng had once felled Daluo Tiangong's elder Yunnan with a single strike. Even now, trapped on all sides, if he spared a moment to land just one blow on them, they might escape with their lives, but only by suffering grievous injuries. 4 titans, all striking a god-king at once? Truly shameless. What little honor they cling to has long since vanished. Yet as the clash unfolded, every spectator was left slack-jawed. High above the swirling sea of clouds, the Zuxian sword formation lit up with thousands of razor-sharp beams. A bone-chilling aura pulsed through the air as boundless swordlight cascaded toward the heavens, its malice so intense that the onlooking monks felt their lungs tighten with each breath. Every blow, the 4 great emperors, 2 on the brink of goddess ascension and 2 perfected masters, launched was effortlessly nullified by the formation's spirit-bane defenses. Their fiercest attacks, delivered in unison, struck the invisible barrier only to be shattered and flattened, leaving the intricate runes of the formation entirely unscathed. Even Daluo Palace Master and his peers dared not meet those flashing blades head-on. Time and again, they found themselves scrambling to evade the surging swordlight, helpless beneath its relentless pressure. It was plain to see, not the combined might of 4 emperors, but Ye Cheng and his Zuxian sword formation held the true advantage. How could it be possible that such formidable adversaries, each a pinnacle of strength in the divine realms, were so completely suppressed by a single god-king? Even as the giants wavered, their pride shattered, the answer remained as sharp and unforgiving as the blades that danced around them. I doubt anyone would believe me if I told them. They'd dismiss it as a fairy tale. And yet here it is in full display, the true might of fellow Taoist Gu. On the far side of the Sea of Clouds, Emperor Xuan drifted across the mist as casually as if he were strolling through a garden. With a single, effortless gesture, he unleashed the Zuxian swordlight, its brilliance rending the sky itself. The 4 great emperors, caught unprepared, scattered in panic as their formation collapsed. Watching from a distance, Ye Cheng stood like a sword immortal newly descended, graceful, composed, and utterly mesmerized. His normally steady gaze flickered with awe. He'd encountered countless prodigies, himself counted among them, yet none had ever come close to this display. Ye Cheng realized in that moment that this was no mere prodigy's talent, but something far greater, a monster of power beyond imagining. Below them, the assembled monks gaped in stunned silence. Never in their wildest dreams had they suspected Ye Cheng's strength could reach such heights. The disciples of the Zhang clan were the worst off of all, frozen, their minds racing to comprehend what they'd just witnessed. Luo Shenyue stood at the edge of the clearing, her mind reeling. She had already witnessed Ye Cheng casually raise a hand and crush a fully awakened emperor-level warrior with a single blow. And now, he was facing down 4 emperors at once, driving them back as if they were mere children. The scene before her seemed like a waking dream. Is this truly the power of Lingbang's Tianjiao? Only a handful of emperors in the entire Lingyu region could ever hope to achieve such feats. How foolish she'd been to imagine using Ye Cheng as a stepping stone to sharpen her own martial arts. Sharpen her arts, she ought to have been sharpening her wits instead. Gratitude and relief washed over her. If Daluo Tiangong and his reinforcements hadn't arrived at that critical moment to hold Ye Cheng at bay, she herself would now be facing his wrath. Across the battlefield, even those sworn to come to Yue Baifeng's aid could only stare in stunned horror. They had expected to rescue a friend, not to watch their own commander, a figure as revered as Daluo Tiangong, crumble beneath a single man's onslaught. They exchanged nervous glances, and all of them instinctively turned to the elders standing at the edge of the battlefield. "Elder, shall we step in?" one voice asked hesitantly. "Yes, Elder, remember our vow to advance and retreat with Brother Yuo," another chimed in. At their words, even the onlooking monks grew pale. Though the Tianhuang and Xuanhuang cultivators weren't individually the strongest, their sheer numbers were intimidating. If they struck, without even entering the main fray, but simply focusing on the Gu family's flank, then even a Xuanhuang-level guardian wouldn't hold them off for long. That maneuver alone could tip the scales dramatically. Yet the emperors who had arrived as reinforcements remained perfectly still. They stood unmoving atop their spirit boats, placid as lotus petals, on still water. Not one of them made a move to support Yue Baifeng. It was almost a farce. They had agreed to the younger generation's plea for aid, but they were no fools. Witnessing Ye Cheng's overwhelming power, they had quietly decided, why risk backing Yue Baifeng or the Daluo Tiangong? The decision was made, no help would come. If Daluo Tiangong and the soul-devouring sect fall today, every last mercenary force that came to their aid will be wiped out. You'd be wiser to stay on the sidelines. At that, the senior kings turned on the younger disciples with cold glares. "Silence! This is my decision. None of you juniors need to weigh in." Across the field, the eyes of the Daluo Palace Master and his lieutenants grew icier by the second. But this reaction was exactly what the Lord of Daluo Palace had expected. These so-called allies had shown up for profit, and now that the tide was turning against them, they were already ready to abandon ship. Clenching his fists, the Lord of Daluo, commander of the Divine Emperor Legion, forced the words out of his throat. "You leave me no choice." Pain flickered in his eyes, quickly drowned by a rising wave of murderous intent as he fixed his gaze on Ye Cheng. "Young man, you will be captured alive. I will force you to tell me every one of your secrets, and make you and your people endure suffering far worse than death," the Lord of Daluo Palace bellowed. With a sharp slap, he struck his storage bag. A streak of crimson light burst forth, revealing a single, blazing pill. Its Dao Song soared into the heavens, its mighty medicinal energy twisting like living fire through the air. Instantly, the cloudsea below him ignited in a roaring sea of scarlet flames. The top-tier, 5th-level Bloodfire Soul Pill! Even the soul-devouring Divine Emperor and the Moon Spirit cried out together in astonishment. A grim smile crossed the Daluo Palace Master's face. Without hesitation, he crushed the pill between his teeth and swallowed. Then, drawing in a steady breath, he unleashed his inner cultivation technique. Condensation! Boom! The explosive power of the elixir erupted within him, sending his aura rocketing upward. In mere heartbeats, he shattered the final barrier of the Divine Emperor realm and soared into the Saint Emperor echelon. Chapter 92. The Blood-Burning Soul Pill is a top-tier, 5th-grade elixir, so rare and potent that even a Saint Emperor would covet it. For any cultivator in the Emperor realm, it's the ultimate trump card. Those below the Saint Emperor can surge forward by several minor realms, and even a true Saint Emperor can momentarily ascend by a full small realm. The Daluo Palace Master, a Queen Realm powerhouse among the divine, had just swallowed one. Under its fierce catalytic energy, he shot up to early Saint Emperor strength, but only for 15 minutes. And that brief taste of divinity comes at a staggering cost. It consumes 1,000 years of his own lifespan. Now, bolstered by that borrowed might, the Daluo Palace Master glared at Ye Cheng with murderous intent burning in his eyes. Fury and desperation twisted his features. Ye Cheng, he snarled, veins throbbing. You've forced my hand. This is my trump card. And now you will pay for pushing me to use it. You must die today, roared the Lord of Daluo Palace. With that shout, his spiritual power swelled and solidified into a colossal palm. He didn't dodge the Zhuxian sword formation's torrents of blade light as he had before. Instead, he met the onslaught head-on. That gargantuan hand smashed through the swirling sword energy, extinguishing every flicker of light in its wake. The monks gathered on the hillside held their breath, awed by such raw, murderous force. But the palace lord was not finished. As the last vestiges of the sword formation's radiance winked out, he lifted his arm again and rent the very void with a thunderous roar. Under the stunned gazes of both the watching monks and the mighty divine emperors, among them the giants Longyu and Tunhun, he produced a new weapon, a horrifying knife wheel. Yet this was no mere echo of the wheel Ye Cheng had just shattered with his formation. 36 inky black blades fanned out around its rim, each edge humming with a malevolent hunger. If the earlier wheel had carried the savage aura of countless battles, this one reeked of wholesale slaughter. A dark instrument crafted to erase every trace of life. A vast, razor-edged wheel floated before them, its surface the color of pure ink and its aura a forbidding, all-consuming void. It seemed to swallow the very light around it, as if nothing could stand against its power. Could this be the ancestral weapon of Daluo Tiangong? The demon wheel of devouring heaven? The soul-devouring divine emperor whispered in awe. The demon wheel of devouring heaven was the greatest treasure left behind by the sect's legendary founder, born during Daluo Tiangong's golden age. A 6th-level divine weapon, it was said to possess the strength to devour heaven and earth. According to ancient records, the first palace master of Daluo Tiangong used it to slay 3 heavenly venerables, securing his fame and cementing the sect's legacy throughout the spirit realm. But with the founder's passing, the sect's brilliance began to fade. Heavenly venerables became all but extinct, and no saint emperor had risen in Daluo Tiangong for countless generations. The demon wheel of devouring heaven was laid to rest in the deepest vaults of the sect, its power dormant, until this moment. No one had expected that the palace master of Daluo had carried the heaven-devouring demon wheel with him all along, and that he would dare to unleash it now. As he summoned the great wheel, its oppressive aura bore down on the Saint Emperor. Both the soul-devouring divine emperor and the moon-divine emperor stared in shock. They swallowed hard, instinctively stepping back to keep their distance. The raw power radiating from Daluo's palace master was far beyond anything they had anticipated, and it terrified them. A satisfied smirk curved the palace master's lips as he turned his gaze to Ye Cheng, who stood resolute at the heart of the sword formation. In a cold, triumphant voice, he declared, "You should count yourself fortunate to meet your end by my Daluo Palace's ancestral weapon, the heaven-devouring demon wheel." He let the words hang in the charged air before adding, "This very wheel once belonged to the first-generation palace master of Daluo. With it, he felled demons and even slew a heavenly venerable. Though I do not yet match his legendary feats, tonight you will witness the true might of my heritage." But with the power of the burning blood and the soul pill, Daluo Palace Master declared, "I can unleash my heaven-devouring demon wheel. My strength will rival that of a true heavenly venerable." The crowd of cultivators fell silent, hearts pounding. In today's spirit realm, the venerable realm itself had become the stuff of legend, an almost mythical plateau few had ever glimpsed, and a heavenly venerable was an even more unfathomable existence. It had been countless years since an ordinary venerable appeared here. A heavenly venerable was unheard of. Yet Daluo Palace Master claimed to stand on that exalted level. Even the divine emperors of Misty Moon and Soul Devouring, perched atop the very same sea of clouds, could only stare, wide-eyed and trembling. They had never faced a venerable before, but the overwhelming aura surrounding Daluo Palace Master made it clear he was utterly serious. High above, Xuanhuang let out a low, awed sigh. "This is the very lifeblood of the spirit realm's giants," she thought, eyes widening at the sight before her. Though their power has waned over the centuries, even in decline, this trump card can still tip the balance when it matters most. A shudder rippled down her spine as the overwhelming aura of the great Daluo Palace Master bore down on her. Despair flickered in her heart. This cruel power might very well be her end. She'd only just regained her strength, and now she found herself trapped in a dead end once more. But to her surprise, Emperor Xuan bore her no resentment. In fact, he was visibly awestruck by Ye Cheng's performance. Relying solely on the immortal sword formation, Ye Cheng had faced the four emperors, each a titan in the God King realm, and, through sheer skill, cunning environmental triggers, and the use of ancestral weapons, had brought them to their knees. Such a feat had no precedent in recorded history. It was nothing short of earth-shattering. Ye Cheng had given everything he had. His enemy's heritage was ancient and formidable, far surpassing anything the Gu clan could muster, so failure was nobody's fault but fate's. Moreover, it was he who had saved her life. How could she repay him with ingratitude? Ye Cheng, she called, steeling her voice against the suffocating dread, I swear I will fight with every ounce of my strength to carve out a chance for us. Hold nothing back. Queen Xuan drew a slow breath, steadying her voice until it rang clear in Ye Cheng's ears. Her life force swirled outward, gathering into a radiant aura, but she no longer had the strength to promise him safe passage or to lead the tribe to freedom. Their adversary stood at the level of a heavenly venerable. Even if she poured every last ounce of her cultivation into a final, all-consuming release, she could not hope to survive his next strike. All she could do was stake her life on buying Ye Cheng a few precious moments to escape. Going to run? Let's see if you can. The Lord of Daluo Palace called from afar, his voice cold with amusement. With a single motion of his hand, the heaven-devouring demon wheel activated. Holy Emperor-grade spirit power, vast as an ocean, surged into the swirling blades. 36 obsidian swords, each one honed sharper than mortal steel, flared to life. A choking black mist rose from the wheel's center, hungry for everything in its path. As the final blade locked into place, the darkness billowed upward in a living storm, blotting out the light. Ye Cheng's heart thundered in his chest. In that moment, he understood that either he would flee through the void or perish beneath the wheel's devouring shadow, his fate resting on the dying sacrifice of the only protector who still cared enough to stand between him and certain annihilation. The heaven-devouring demon wheel had already coalesced into a 10-foot-long black spiral, spinning silently in midair. Like a ravenous black hole, it hungrily sucked in every scrap of spiritual energy around it. They say that when the first-generation Lord of Daluo Palace unleashed this very demon wheel, it swallowed even moonlight and sunlight, plunging the world into darkness for a heartbeat. I still long to witness that spectacle myself. The current Lord of Daluo Palace watched the churning void above him, a triumphant smile curling at the corners of his mouth. In a low, excited hiss, he added, I may be but a fraction of my ancestors' power, but today I will make short work of you two. He had no doubt that once the wheel had done its work, Ye Cheng and Xuanhuang would be helpless. The demon wheel consumed only the body, sealing their souls within its enchanted core. Then, with their spirits trapped, he could extract every secret of their cultivation at his leisure. Come to me and die. With a thunderous roar, the Daluo Palace Lord thrust his palm forward. A wave of raw energy exploded outward, aimed squarely at Ye Cheng and Xuanhuang. Ye Cheng and Xuanhuang barely had a moment to react before the black mediator hurtled toward them like a raging meteor. Wherever it passed, swirling onyx mist spilled across the sky, blotting out the light. From a distance, the spinning blades no longer looked like a weapon at all, but a boundless, churning sea of darkness. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to flee, as the very heavens and earth were swallowed by the encroaching void. Is this the power of the heavenly venerable? Ye Cheng gasped, voice tight with awe and fear. As the devouring heaven demon wheel activated, its obsidian mist multiplied and rolled outward like a tide across the 8 wastelands, crushing everything beneath an invisible weight. Xuanhuang's heart sank. She had hoped that, with one final exertion of her divine emperor might, she could carve out a spark of salvation for Ye Cheng. But under the wheel's oppressive force, even she found her spiritual energy stifled, each pulse of power harder to summon than the last. The darkness pressed in, and for the first time, she realized how utterly overwhelming this threat truly was. It's over. A hush fell over the onlookers as the devouring heaven wheel slammed to the ground with an earth-shaking crash. Many cultivators exchanged resigned sighs and knowing nods. No matter how formidable Ye Cheng was, he couldn't withstand an assault of this magnitude. "The end of a prodigy is tragic," murmured one elder, "but he asked for it himself." A few speakers shot cold-eyed smirks. Their gazes flickered toward the ruins of the Gu family estate, where Jiang Lincheng's forces had just laid waste. With the Gu clan destroyed, its remaining strength would surely be seized by Deluo Tiangong, yet the surrounding sects and power blocks would not stand idle. They'd vie fiercely for scraps of its legacy, treating this collapse like a grand banquet of spoils. Still, the veteran cultivators couldn't suppress their regret. Ye Cheng's talent had shone brighter than any star in the spirit realm. Given time, none here could have bound him. He was destined to venture beyond these skies and carve out a reputation that every cultivator would respect and envy. But now, all they could do was shake their heads at how even the greatest lives must sometimes end in failure. Ye Cheng's downfall, they told themselves, was a harsh but fitting conclusion. "This world has never lacked geniuses," one of the elder cultivators bellowed, his voice rolling across the clearing. "But you must learn to temper your brilliance. Only by striking out relentlessly can you hope to shine like the sun itself. Otherwise, you'll end up like Ye Cheng, burning fiercely as a comet, then vanishing without a trace." Several elders gestured up at Ye Cheng, suspended in midair, using him as a dire warning for their disciples. In the distance, the Daluo Palace Master watched with narrowed eyes and barely concealed excitement. He was poised to pounce the moment Ye Cheng's spirit wavered, ready to seize the secrets of his sword formation and claim his inheritance. Escape? To the Palace Master, the very idea was laughable. "Stand before me," he proclaimed, his voice cold with confidence. "You are powerless in my presence. I, whose strength rivals that of the heavenly venerates, will crush any hope you have of turning the tide." Although he had never faced a true heavenly venerate, his certainty never faltered. Yet before his words could settle over the crowd, a calm voice cut through the tension. "On par with the heavenly venerates?" Heads snapped around. A solitary figure stepped forward, his gaze level and unflinching. Silence fell as he regarded the Palace Master, then spoke with quiet conviction. "I refuse to believe it." Chapter 93. A hush fell over the crowd as Ye Cheng's soft voice drifted across the arena. Eyes widened in astonishment, heart skipped a beat, and then, without warning, a rush of wind tore through the air. A jagged tear split the void beside Ye Cheng, and an elderly figure in a simple gray robe stepped out. His garb was unadorned, but his presence was unmistakable, calm, unyielding, and centered. Only his eyes betrayed the depths within, pools of starlit wisdom, as if entire galaxies swirled behind their surface. Without hesitation, the old man closed the distance in a single stride and positioned himself before Ye Cheng, positioning the young cultivator safely behind him. A thunderous clash followed. The sky-devouring demon wheel, a terrifying disk wreathed in a boundless sea of inky black fog, barreled toward its target. Its maw opened wide, hungry for destruction, but the old man was faster. In one fluid motion, he seized the spinning wheel by its rim. The dark mist writhed around his arm like a living thing, yet he held firm. Crack! A blinding flash of light burst from his palm, and an overwhelming wave of force roared outward. The oppressive power swept across the battlefield, rattling stones and whipping up eddies of dust. All around, cultivators staggered under the onslaught, but the old man stood unshaken, the demon wheel frozen in his iron grip. A tremor pulsed through the air, and the inky fog that had cloaked the devouring heavenly demon wheel shattered like glass. In an instant, the swirling darkness evaporated, leaving only the wheel itself, its ominous aura still crackling with raw power. Even the spirit imprints left by the first-generation Palace Master of Daluo Tiangong dissolved the moment the fog cleared. From above, a gray-robed elder descended without warning. With one swift, fluid motion, he seized the demon wheel, drawing it effortlessly into his own cultivation. Though the onlookers felt the moment stretch on, the entire sequence unfolded in the blink of an eye. Every face around them went pale. The devouring heavenly demon wheel, long held as the ultimate safeguard of the Daluo Palace Master, had been plucked away by this mysterious old man standing beside Ye Cheng. Shocked cries rang out across the battlefield. What just happened? Who's got the demon wheel? The current palace master of Daluo Tiangong staggered back, his voice trembling with disbelief. No, this can't be. Absolutely impossible. How could you possibly take my devouring heaven demon wheel from me? The roar still echoed through the battlefield. Only someone with the power of a heavenly venerable could unleash such an assault, and yet here it was, not only repelled but wrested away. The Daluo Palace Master's eyes widened in disbelief. According to the records of the Daluo Heavenly Palace, no ordinary Xuanzun cultivator could withstand that attack, let alone seize the weapon itself. Then what, was the old man standing beside Ye Cheng? Mid-Xuanzun? Late? Perfect? Or a full-fledged heavenly venerable? Silence fell over everyone present as they stared at the gray-robed figure. Awe and fear flickered across their faces. That gray-robed elder was none other than Ye Cheng's Tianlian god puppet, the divine automaton bound to his Tianlian saint body. Although its power grows alongside Ye Cheng's own cultivation, its base strength was already formidable. While Ye Cheng himself was only in the early stage of god monarch, his Tianlian god puppet fought with the true might of an early-stage heavenly venerable. The assembled masters exchanged startled glances. In all their years at the Daluo Heavenly Palace, they had never encountered such a terrifying combination, an early god monarch whose very puppet outclassed the mightiest Xuanzun. Now, as the devouring heaven demon wheel hovered protectively beside the gray-robed puppet, it was clear to everyone. Ye Cheng and his undying automaton were forces to be reckoned with. Facing a so-called venerable who leans on treasure pills and magic weapons is nothing. And if the Grand Luo Palace Master produces another pill to break through into the Xuanzun realm, the heavenly Lian god puppet can still handle him. Not far away, Xuan Huang, who had already poured every ounce of his strength into a desperate stance, stood rooted in shock. After a moment, he shook his head, forcing a bitter smile in Ye Cheng's direction. A flicker of resentment passed over his features. So you never needed me after all. Xuan Huang had long worried over Ye Cheng, ready to fight tooth and nail for his safety. Under those resentful eyes, Ye Cheng felt a brief twinge of embarrassment. But there was no time for apologies. He turned his gaze back to the Grand Luo Palace Master and let a cold sneer curve his lips. Grand Luo Palace Master, Ye Cheng called out coolly. With your meager strength, you actually compare yourself to a Tianzun? You're not even close to an Xuanzun. At Ye Cheng's open taunt, the Grand Luo Palace Master's face darkened, anger and humiliation warring in his eyes as the battle's tension snapped tighter than ever. Daluo Palace Master finally staggered back to his senses, only to find himself staring in shock at the Tianlian god puppet's overwhelming power. He'd barely taken 3 steps before panic drove him to retreat again, unwilling to test his strength any further. Not far behind him, the soul-devouring god emperor of the soul-devouring sect and the Longyu god emperor, both summoned by Hua Lianyi of the Hua family, were also scrambling to put distance between themselves and the puppet. Dark Moon god emperor, in particular, showed no courtesy to the Hua family's little princess. With a disdainful curl of his sleeve, he transformed into a beam of inky moonlight and shot away into the heavens. The soul-devouring god emperor took a different route to safety. He unleashed his greatest creation, the soul-devouring mist. The dense fog exploded outward, splintering into hundreds of ethereal fragments, each a single soul intent on escape. The mist itself was shattered, but as long as even one fragment survived, the god emperor's life could be preserved and someday rebuilt. Against such desperate measures, Ye Cheng's contingency plan stood as a testament to his foresight. The gray-robed elder he had invited, though not a full Tianzun, was undeniably a genuine Xuanzun realm powerhouse. His presence alone had shifted the tide, forcing emperors to abandon even their most devastating abilities just to flee. The battlefield lay littered with the remnants of shattered aura and fading godly might, all underscoring one immutable fact. Ye Cheng's allies were forces to be reckoned with. Ye Cheng wasn't an ordinary Xuanzun. He had even wrested away the ancestral weapon of the Daluo Tiangong, the fabled heaven-devouring demon wheel, and that was on top of defeating 2 perfect god emperors. Even if another 20 appeared, none could withstand him. Against such overwhelming power, only ruin awaited. "Run," Ye Cheng said, his voice chillingly calm. "Let's see how far you get." A blazing aura rippled around the fleeing giant god emperor as he fled in terror. Ye Cheng watched him go, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Chapter 94. Every activation of the heavenly refining god puppet was a precious resource, so once the order to strike was given, they had to make it count. Ye Cheng's voice boomed across the battlefield. "No holding back. Every enemy before us must be destroyed." "Understood, Master," came the puppet's emotionless reply. In the next instant, it surged into the air like a colossal rock unfurling its wings. Faster than the eye could follow, it closed in on the fleeing moon god emperor of the Hua clan. "I am an elder of the Hua family in the spirit realm. Our clan answers to the Saint Emperor Giant. Spare my life, and every member of the Hua family will serve you." The moon god emperor gasped, his pride shattered into desperate supplication. But the heavenly refining god puppet paid no heed. To imagine bargaining with a foe backed by a saint emperor's power was sheer fantasy. Without a word, it raised its massive hand and brought it down with unstoppable force. With a single casual palm strike, the towering figure who had long dominated the spirit realm, now perfected as a divine emperor, was reduced to a swirling mist of blood before he could even let out a cry. The monks gathered around, watching the battle, flinched in astonishment. This was no ordinary cultivator. He was a top-tier master, one of the very few divine emperors in the entire spirit realm, and he'd just been obliterated as easily as one might crush an insect. "Is this truly the Venerable's power?" someone whispered. Daluo Palace Master and Yulong Deputy Palace Master felt their hearts seize with terror. Even the soul-devouring divine emperor, who had fractured himself into over 100 disembodied souls and fled to the edge of the battlefield, stopped dead in his tracks. His ethereal forms trembled as they watched. Panic flared within him. He unleashed every last reserve of spiritual energy, desperate to flee further. But the Tianlian divine puppet, Ye Cheng's ultimate weapon, responded with only a slight flick of its sleeve. A thunderous roar filled the air. A devouring force of unimaginable ferocity erupted from the puppet's garment, dwarfing even the Daluo Palace Master's famed devouring heaven demon wheel. In that single, overwhelming surge, the fleeing souls of the soul-devouring divine emperor were torn apart, reabsorbed, and erased from existence. No one who had witnessed the scene could doubt it any longer. Ye Cheng, the Venerable, stood peerless at the pinnacle of power. In an instant, the hundreds of souls that the soul-devouring divine emperor had torn apart were drawn back in and consumed, reduced to absolute nothingness. Before any of the spectators could recover their bearings, another perfect divine emperor lay dead. The two palace masters of Daluo Tiangong and Yue Baifeng stared, stunned, as Ye Cheng's cold gaze settled on them. The Daluo palace master dropped to his knees, voice choking with terror as he begged for mercy. But Ye Cheng did not grant a single moment's hesitation. With a casual lift of his hand, he summoned the Tianlian Shenkui. 3 brilliant beams of light shot down from the sky like blazing meteorites. In the span of a heartbeat, they struck Yue Baifeng and both palace masters with pinpoint precision, obliterating all 3 in a flash of white-hot energy. When the light faded, even ashes remained behind. "Ah!" A collective gasp rippled through the assembled cultivators. Their throats went dry, their minds reeled. None had dared imagine such a swift, absolute end. Had they not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that Ye Cheng could wipe out 3 divine emperors in a single stroke. Throughout the entire spiritual realm, Daluo Tiangong, the once unrivaled powerhouse whose Grand Palace Master, Deputy Palace Master, and Queen God-era giants all fell like helpless insects, was crushed in an instant. And yet, when the assembled cultivators recalled the far more gruesome deaths of the Longyu Divine Emperor and the soul-devouring Divine Emperor from the soul-devouring sect, this outcome began to feel almost inevitable. Shock gave way to a hollow numbness. No one was more stunned than the Jiang family. They had come expecting to witness the Gu family's ruin, only to find themselves face-to-face with Ye Cheng's ultimate trump card. Even the might of Daluo Palace, a force the Jiangs never dreamed worthy of their attention, was effortlessly subdued by him alone. How could they not tremble with regret? If only they had shown the Gu family a shred of respect, offered a token courtesy, even a single incense stick, none of this would have been possible. With the Gu family's newfound power, how far could their alliance with the Jiang clan stretch? Could they wrest control of the Han and Qin empires? Might they even claim the southern reaches of the spirit realm, or perhaps the entire realm itself? Such ambitions once seemed within grasp, but now they felt as fragile as soap bubbles. Around him, cultivators from both empires exchanged low murmurs of awe as they gazed at Ye Cheng, poised above the sea of clouds. After today, who would dare say the Gu family has fallen? Outside the Han and Qin borders, few remembered the Gu family's storied past, but within them, countless forces still whispered of its former glory. Even now, those veterans could only sigh in subdued admiration. Their words drifted back to the Jiang clan, echoing painfully in the hearts of Jiang Yunshan, Jiang Baiwei, and every other Jiang cultivator. Regret washed over them, unrelenting and deep. Yet Ye Cheng gave their remorse no notice, his focus fixed firmly on the future. After the last of the invaders fell, Ye Cheng turned to Xuanhuang with a confident smile. "Fellow Taoist Xuanhuang, I may be calling on your help soon." Xuanhuang raised an eyebrow, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. In her estimation, Ye Cheng's power already surpassed her own. With the mysterious gray-robed elder as his guardian, she could think of little more she might offer him. Unless— "What do you have in mind, Taoist Gu?" she asked. Ye Cheng nodded toward the abandoned spirit boat the Daluo Tiangong forces had fled in. "In our battle just now, I slew both their palace master and deputy palace master. The rest of Daluo Tiangong is leaderless and scattered. Not even a divine emperor could rally them now. I ask that you, in my name, board that vessel, subdue the remnants of Daluo Tiangong, and lay claim to its legacy." He drew himself up, voice firm. "From this moment on, Daluo Tiangong will no longer exist. Its name will be struck from the annals of history. In its place shall rise Xuanqian Palace, under your command." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The palace master, the deputy palace master, and Yue Baifeng all lie dead by my hand. A new era begins now. Even though Daluo Tiangong has fallen, its vast reserves, endless spiritual veins, rich mineral deposits, and a network of related industries remain intact. These assets would be a tremendous boon to the Gu family. Patriarch Ye Cheng therefore entrusted Xuanhuang with seizing control of whatever still belongs to Daluo Tiangong. Not only would this ensure that none of those resources went to waste, but, by inheriting Daluo Tiangong's legacy, the Gu family's influence would spread rapidly into the very heart of the central spiritual domain, far quicker than if they'd tried to expand on their own. If the survivors of Daluo Tiangong know what's best for them, they'll fall in under your banner, Ye Cheng warned. If they don't— Before the patriarch could finish his threat, Xuanhuang offered a slight, confident smile. "Rest easy, Dao Gu," he said. "Anyone foolish enough to resist will be sent straight to their loyal palace master." With that, Xuanhuang bowed and departed to carry out his orders. Within hours, every last remnant of Daluo Tiangong and its entire inheritance was utterly extinguished. The assembled dignitaries, those powerful elders whom their juniors had coaxed into aiding Daluo Tiangong, stood with bitter resentment on their lips. When they caught Ye Cheng's unwavering even these proud Xuanhuang Tianhuangs felt their knees buckle. Before Ye Cheng could utter a single word, they dropped to their knees in unison. "Evergreen God King," one choked out, "we humbly beg your forgiveness for our past offenses. Thankfully, none of your family was harmed. Please have mercy on us." Ye Cheng's eyes were cold as steel as he surveyed the groveling magnates. "Forgive your offenses? And what price are you prepared to pay for that pardon?" One of the emperors, voice quavering, managed to protest. "Price? We haven't done anything." Ye Cheng let out a soft, mocking laugh. "Do you take me for a child?" he asked, his gaze slicing through them. "Had I not unleashed the Zhuxian sword formation and showcased my true power, would any of you have remained idle spectators? No, you only held back because you feared me." He paused, his expression unreadable. "Very well. If you truly believe yourselves blameless, then I have no cause to punish you. Where in heaven's name can you find a deal this sweet? If you truly wish to clear your name, there's only one way. Travel back in time and refuse the Lord of Daluo Palace's invitation. But can you even do that? One of the Spirit Realm Masters stammered. Ye Cheng waved a hand dismissively. I'll give you exactly 7 days to come up with satisfactory compensation. Fail to meet that deadline, and I'll pay a personal visit to your clan. Faced with Ye Cheng's unwavering resolve, and with Tianlian Shenkui looming behind him like a silent warning, the assembled masters were left speechless. Shamed and defeated, they slunk away, hastening back to their clans to petition their elders and scrape together whatever resources they could to placate him. Along the way, no doubt, they taught their young disciples a harsh lesson in obedience. Once they'd departed, Ye Cheng felt an unfamiliar energy brushing against his awareness. He turned and froze. Standing there was Luo Shenyu, the prodigious talent who had once held the top spot on the spirit rankings. A slow smile spread across Ye Cheng's face as old memories clicked back into place. Ye Cheng couldn't help but turn back, eyeing the courageous yet graceful young woman with genuine curiosity. "You're Miss Luo Shenyu, aren't you?" he asked softly. He found himself wondering why she had come all this way to find him in the first place. Chapter 95. When Ye Cheng offered her a gentle smile, Luo Shenyu couldn't help the faint twitch at the corners of her mouth. She cleared her throat and forced an awkward laugh. "Oh no, really, I'm just passing through. Hey." Of course, she wasn't really bluffing. After witnessing Ye Cheng's devastating sword formation lay waste to the 4 emperors and seeing the Tianlian god puppet, an immortal guardian rivaling a venerable, standing by his side, Luo Shenyu knew better than to pick a fight. She might be obsessed with martial arts, but she wasn't foolish. If it hadn't been for the Daluo Tiangong Palace Master's ultimate gambit, the life-saving elixir and the ancestral artifact, Ye Cheng alone could have crushed the 4 emperors without even needing that venerable-level protector. Having exchanged quick pleasantries, Luo Shenyu bowed and hurried out of Jianglin City. Her mind raced with everything she'd witnessed today, and she couldn't wait to share the news with her family. In fact, she wasn't the only one in a rush. As soon as the battle for Jianglin City ended, every monk who had observed the fight clamored to send word back to their respective sects and clans, each eager to report on the astonishing power they had just seen. Several dozen veteran cultivators from the central spiritual domain had rushed to assist the Daluo Tiangong, pressing their spirit boats to their absolute limits. None of them dared fall behind. Ye Cheng's 7-day deadline loomed like a guillotine over every one of them. On the 7th dawn, their flotilla reappeared on the horizon, and at its helm strode Xuanhuang. He entered the heart of the central domain, bearing 2 massive banners, the proud sigil of the Gu family, alongside the emblem of Xuantian Palace. With unassailable authority, he formally accepted the inheritance of the Daluo Tiangong, sending shockwaves through the entire spiritual domain. Far to the west, within the Patriarch's Hall of the Hua family, an almost palpable stillness fell over every courtyard and corridor. As one of the few Saint-Emperor lineages, the Hua family commanded awe even from the mightiest god-emperors. Their prestige sprang from a single, legendary ancestor, a Saint-Emperor whose renown eclipsed that of any living warrior. So great was their aura that no one, not even a lowly retainer, would dream of crossing them. A steward of the Hua family at God-King rank could rival an emperor-level powerhouse. Yet now, in the wake of Xuanhuang's triumphal entry and the unfurling of the Gu family standard, an unfamiliar solemnity gripped the ancient clan. Patriarchs exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the balance of power in the central domain was shifting in ways they had never anticipated. Hua Tianquan's voice still echoed through the ancestral hall of the Hua family, his temper scarcely contained. Only yesterday, in this very chamber, the Jade Order token of his eldest daughter, Hua Lianyi, had exploded in his hand, an act of unimaginable disrespect and portentous danger. Now he paced before the grand ancestral altar, fury darkening his features. "Do you hear me?" he thundered. "Track down whoever dared slay my daughter, Hua Lianyi. I want their bones ground to dust." His steward, old, stooped, and trembling, bowed so deeply that his forehead nearly brushed the polished stone floor. "Master, we have news," he replied, voice quivering more from fear than exertion. He unrolled a scroll, hands shaking as he pointed to the hastily scrawled characters. Eldest Miss Liani departed for Daluo Palace 3 days ago. She traveled south into the spiritual domain in the company of young Master Yue Baifeng of Daluo Palace. Hua Tianquan's eyes flared, but the steward pressed on, voice barely above a whisper. They went to the southern reaches, into the Han and Qin Empire, to march on the Gu clan. Rumor says it was payback. The Gu family slew Yue Baifeng's sister, Yu Lingxuan. A roar tore from Hua Tianquan's throat. The cultivators of the Han and Qin Empire murdered my sister's daughter? He slammed a fist into the altar table, sending incense burners clattering. Find every last one of them. I will not rest until they've paid for this atrocity. Shock and determination warred in his eyes as he swept from the hall. The steward remained behind, quaking and wondering if the violence he'd unleashed would ever be sated. Behind Hua Tianquan stood his wife, the lady of the Hua clan, resplendent in silken robes. Normally composed, her eyes now blazed with murderous fury. "What are you waiting for?" she hissed. "Dispatch the troops at once. I want the entire Han Qin Empire wiped out, every cultivator and commoner alike, buried alongside my daughter." The chief steward stumbled forward, panic in his voice. "Madam, with respect, the target isn't the whole empire, but the Han Qin branch of the Gu family." Lady Hua did not even glance at him. Instead, she fixed her husband with a cold stare. "Tianquan," she demanded, "will you give the order?" Hua Tianquan's jaw clenched. He shared his wife's grief and anger, but the notion of exterminating an entire empire struck him as unbearably cruel. Still, when he met the fierce resolve in his wife's eyes, when he remembered that his only legitimate child, Hua Lianyi, had perished at the hands of that very Gu clan, his resistance crumbled. His other children, born to concubines, could never claim her place. With a heavy heart, he bowed his head in reluctant assent. Hua Tianquan's eyes gleamed with ruthless resolve. "Let the other cultivators and mortals of the Han Qin Empire perish," he declared. "If there's blame to be laid, let it fall upon them, and the Gu family, for they all hail from the same quarter." He was about to issue a final order when a sudden rush of power cut through the hall like a gale. In an instant, everyone, Hua Tianquan, his distraught wife, and the other clan elders, felt their blood chill and their minds still. Through the shimmering veil of spirit energy strode a towering figure, aura blazing like a blazing sun. At once, every member of the Hua family dropped to one knee, heads bent low. Even Hua Tianquan, who had never shown fear, bowed with utmost reverence. "Ancestor," they greeted in unison. At their summons, the elder stepped forward, robes whispering across the marble floor. His face, carved with the years of a boundless saint emperor, betrayed no surprise, only cold authority. The eldest matriarch, who had retreated into seclusion months before, now stood at the forefront, eyes shining with desperate hope. She dared to speak. "Ancestor, this outrage cannot go unpunished. Hua Tianquan's enemy has slain my daughter. Surely you will avenge her?" The Saint Emperor's gaze flicked over her sorrow, then settled onto the clan head. His voice, low and unyielding, silenced the hall. "This matter ends here." Shock rippled through the Hua family. Even Hua Tianquan, who had been moments from issuing an execution order, dared not protest. The Emperor's words were final. With his pronouncement echoing in their minds, the assembled cultivators bowed their heads, grudgingly swallowing their thirst for vengeance. Outside the hall, the storm of grief and anger would have to wait, superseded for now by absolute immutable decree. Enough with this talk of wiping out the Han Qin Empire and annihilating the Gu family. The Hua family's ancestor's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. He didn't even glance at the eldest lady. His gaze was fixed solely on the family head, Hua Tianquan. "Tianquan," he continued, "at once arrange for a generous gift envoy. Travel to the Han Qin Empire personally and offer a full apology to the Gu family, specifically to Gu Ye Cheng. Make haste. Do I make myself clear?" Tianquan's face drained of color. Around him, the entire hall fell into stunned silence. The eldest lady clenched her fists, her eyes blazing with indignation. Their daughter had been slain by the Gu family's hand. How could they now bow and apologize? Just as she opened her mouth to protest, Hua Tianquan stepped forward, placing a calming hand on her wrist. He turned back to the ancestor and bowed deeply, voice steady though his heart pounded. "Yes, ancestor, I understand. We will depart without delay. Only then did the eldest lady lower her eyes, bitter fury simmering beneath the surface. In that solemn hall, the Hua family prepared to swallow their pride and seek forgiveness from the very lineage they had sworn to destroy. Hua Tianxuan's voice trembled as he watched his father stride away. "Father, that opponent, he really is that strong?" Without so much as a glance back, the patriarch of the Hua clan paused on the threshold and spoke only 2 words, "Your Excellency." Those words struck like thunder. Hua Tianxuan and the matriarch stood frozen, the echo of that single title rattling their confidence. Only after the venerable ancestor had vanished from sight did they dare draw breath, and still they did not speak of retaliation. The Hua family boasted but one saint emperor in its venerable lineage. To provoke an invincible power in the spirit realm would be sheer folly. Better, they concluded, to swallow their pride, bow deeply, and live to fight another day. 3 months slipped by, and the uproar over the Gu clan finally subsided from its fever pitch. Yet whispers of Ye Cheng's name still stirred awe and a little fear throughout the spirit realm. Today, the Gu family stands at the zenith of its influence. In the Central Territories, forces once allied with Hua have quietly dispatched envoys bearing lavish gifts and profuse apologies. Within the grand courtyard of the Gu estate, young master Ye Cheng received each delegation with unruffled grace, his calm composure reminding all present that true power lies not in thunderous proclamations, but in measured restraint. Emperor Xuan had recently restructured the Xuan Palace, designating it as the vanguard of the Gu family and cementing their dominance over the spirit realm. In truth, the Gu clan scarcely gave the decree a second thought. Instead, its core members, Ye Cheng, Jiang Lianxin, Gu Yunxi, and Gu Qingchen, made their way into the heart of the Dream Spring to undergo its legendary purifying rite. Dream Spring was no ordinary cultivation ground, but a sanctified remnant of the ancients, its waters swirling with a concentrated, almost tangible spiritual essence. From the moment he immersed himself in its depths, Ye Cheng felt that very essence seep into his bones and blood. Day after day, as he refined his qi within the spring's embrace, his strength grew by leaps and bounds. One evening, as Ye Cheng sat in silent meditation beneath drifting petals, an unfamiliar warmth flared in his chest. He opened his eyes, brow furrowed, sensing a sudden surge in his blood's vitality. The pulse in his veins beat stronger, purer than ever, as if some long-dormant legacy had been reawakened. His heart quickened at the realization. Could it be the bloodline pulse? He murmured, voice tinged with awe. Before he could ponder further, a ripple in the water caught his attention. He was not alone. A new presence lingered at the edge of Dream Spring, watching him. Gu Yuan and the other core members of the Gu clan, along with Gu Yunxi and Gu Qingchen, suddenly felt their auras tighten and intensify. It was the unmistakable sign that the Gu family's hidden Saint clan bloodline was stirring back to life. But such a revival demanded that someone rise into the Emperor realm. As formidable as Ye Cheng's power was, he remained far short of that lofty tier. "It looks like someone in our clan has already broken through to the Emperor realm," he murmured, a hint of excitement flitting across his features. Ye Cheng allowed himself a small, knowing smile. He sensed immediately that this breakthrough had nothing to do with the Jianglincheng branch of the Gu family, and certainly not with the Wangqin Island offshoot where Gu Qinger hailed from. It had to be some other Gu lineage, one long lost to a distant corner of the spirit realm, or perhaps even beyond its borders. In the family's heyday, its branches had spread across countless domains, making it all too natural that a stray bloodline might re-emerge far from home. Ye Cheng's surprise was tempered by understanding. The Gu clan's glory had always fostered far-flung legacies, waiting quietly for the right moment to awaken. Ye Cheng shook his head in quiet amusement. He had been certain he'd be the first to shatter the imperial barrier and resurrect the Gu family's storied Saint clan bloodline, only to discover someone else had beaten him to it. Still, in a way, the news lifted his spirits. If another branch had already reached the imperial realm, it proved the Gu clan's heritage wasn't as withered as the Jianglincheng and Wangqin Island branches had feared. With that comforting thought, he brushed aside all distractions and resumed his strategic withdrawal through the mist-shrouded mountains. Meanwhile, on the Nanshuan Divine Continent, In Chanyu of Kangming King City, excitement boiled over within the city lord's mansion. Every member of the Gu family had gathered in the ancestral hall's great courtyard, their voices echoing off the marble pillars. "Kneel, ancestor has broken into the imperial realm," they chanted in unison, dropping to one knee in reverent salute. "Our Saint clan lives again." Eyes shining with pride, young and old alike bowed deeply toward the hall's inner sanctum. There, behind a pair of carved jade doors, sat the family's oldest scion, a 1,000-year-old patriarch whose white hair and long beard alone spoke of centuries gone by. Hearing the tumultuous praise, the ancient man rose to his full height, his expression both stern and gratified, as he prepared to welcome his descendants and usher in a new era for the Gu family's Saint clan. With each step, the wheezing old man seemed to shed years of age. His stooped shoulders straightened, and though his face was still lined with wrinkles, his eyes blazed with new life. He strode to the great doors of the ancestral hall, his voice ringing out like a clear bronze bell that carried to every corner of the courtyard. "Announce my decree," he boomed. "Today, Ye Cheng, step into the imperial realm. For the glory of our sacred bloodline, I will revive the Kangming Gu family and restore it as the principal branch of our clan. And as the head of the main line, I bear its responsibilities. I command the 36 clan elders and the 72 direct line prodigies to enter the ancestral hall at once. There, you shall claim our sacred relics and depart this very day, journeying to all corners of the world in search of our scattered kin. Should you encounter any promising talents, those worthy of true cultivation, bring them back to the main line. We will train and nurture them, forging the strength our clan so desperately needs. But mark this well, no one may be forced. If anyone from a collateral branch refuses to come, you must not compel them. Our revival must stand on willing hearts." In the ancestral hall, the patriarch's voice rang out with unmistakable authority. "You are to supply our young talents with elixirs and provisions, so they can train uninterrupted at home. Make sure none of them sullies the reputation of our main branch. Remember, our Gu clan stands apart now. We must present a united front. Is that understood?" At these words, every younger member of the Kangming Gu family sat in rapt attention, then bowed deeply in unison. Immediately, 36 clan elders and 72 of the main branch's brightest disciples sprang to their feet, eyes alight with excitement. This was the very first grand directive the patriarch had issued since ascending to the imperial realm. If carried through successfully, it would mark a feat worthy of clan legend. With heartfelt bows, each elder and prodigy retrieved their sacred weapon, accepted the precious elixirs, rare medicinal herbs, cultivation resources, and time-honored techniques designated for the branch families, and then one by one they boarded their spirit boats and set sail into the morning mist. No sooner had they departed than a thunderous boom echoed across the courtyard. A surging aura burst forth from the Mengyuquan Technique's energy core, lifting the spirit vessel into the sky. Ye Cheng's eyes shone with joy. Having just completed his final trials under the Mengyuquan method, his cultivation had at last soared into the realm of the perfected God King. Ye Cheng stood on the training hall's balcony, gazing at the distant horizon. He was tantalizingly close, just one breakthrough away from the Emperor realm. If only Mengyuquan had another month to guide him, Ye Cheng would undoubtedly shatter that final barrier. Still, he couldn't complain. His cultivation had already soared to the perfected stage of a God King, and his Tianlian divine soul had ascended in kind, vaulting straight into the perfected Tianzun tier. He wasn't the only one who'd made dramatic gains. Guyuan's household had seen similar leaps. His wife, Zhang Lianxin, had just entered the late Xuanwang stage. The gentle curve of her belly hinted that their third daughter would arrive any day now. And Xuanhuang, after her devastating battle with Daluo Tiangong, had rebounded remarkably. Though she hadn't fully regained her prime power, she now stood solidly in the late Shenhuang stage, far stronger than before. As he watched his friends training below, Ye Cheng felt a surge of pride and relief. These breakthroughs would fortify the entire clan. Yet he also knew that power alone wouldn't safeguard them. Later that evening, he and Guyuan would meet in the study to finalize plans. They would discreetly dispatch scouts into the Hui clan's territories, determined to uncover which branch had already ascended to the Emperor realm, and to establish contact before anyone else even knew they existed. With allies at that level, the Gu clan's future would be all but assured. He hadn't even finished formulating his plan when, swoosh, a jade talisman streaked in from the distance and hovered before him. It was the dispatch he'd commissioned from Xuan Tiangong's operatives, fresh intelligence on the Nalan family. "Did you recover the Tianjiao roster for Qianyu?" Ye Cheng prompted. The messenger hesitated, sliding a scroll across the table. "We did, but what good is it?" Puzzled, Ye Cheng unfurled the parchment. His heart skipped a beat when his eyes settled on the 5th entry of the Qianyu list, Nalan Qingyuan. He leaned closer. The name felt oddly familiar, so familiar, in fact, that if you replaced Nalan with Gu, it became the name he'd been searching for all along, Gu Qingyuan. Standing beside him, Gu Yuan could no longer contain himself. "Ye Cheng, this Nalan Qingyuan could be your sister." Ye Cheng's gaze hardened with resolve. He and his sister had never met, but that the mighty Nalan clan had claimed her spoke volumes about her talent. And Qianyu, one of the largest, wealthiest regions in all Nanshuan Shenzhou, would only admit a prodigy of the highest caliber. If she'd truly made her name there, she must be extraordinary. Lingyu, a modest territory in Nanshuan Shenzhou, barely registers even among the mid-level domains. In such regions, an Emperor Realm cultivator is titled Venerable, while those who ascend to God Emperor or Saint Emperor are hailed as hegemons. But in the vast expanse of Qianyu, only someone who has reached the Venerable realm can truly claim overlordship. Even so, Ye Cheng's younger sister, ranked 5th on Qianyu's prestigious Tianjiao roster, already commands widespread respect for her talent. "I'll go to Xuanchen Palace and question the original informant," Ye Cheng announced, his gaze steady. "If anyone knows more, it'll be him." "I'm coming too," Xuan Huang said without hesitation. Gu Yuan, Ye Cheng's father, hardly registered the rumor about a branch cultivator breaking into the Emperor realm. His primary concern was the safety of his wife and daughter. After all, his grandson already had a venerable-level protector at his side. Compared to that, news of yet another Emperor realm breakthrough seemed trivial. Seeing his son's earnest determination, Gu Yuan nodded in agreement. "2. Lianshin, take my grandson and granddaughter back to the Gu estate," Ye Cheng instructed once more. With his children safely dispatched, Ye Cheng, Xuan Huang, and Gu Yuan set off immediately for Xuanqian Palace, their hearts racing with anticipation. They pressed on and soon arrived at Xuanqian Palace. There, they summoned the imperial envoy who'd been quietly investigating the Nalan clan and put him through a careful questioning. Unfortunately, his resources were limited. He'd managed to uncover only a dossier on the Qianyu domain. "At least that gives us a lead," Ye Cheng said, tracing the edge of the parchment. "Qianyu is a vast territory with far richer intelligence than Lingyu. We're bound to gain much more by heading there." Resolved, he and Emperor Xuan made their preparations. Ye Cheng's first priority was to find his missing father, and the clues pointed squarely to Qianyu. But just as they were about to depart, something extraordinary happened. Far off, over the endless sea of clouds that stretched between the Han and Qin empires, a rent tore open in the sky. From that rift emerged a lone spirit boat, gliding out as if summoned by fate. Its sails snapped in the high wind, emblazoned with 4 great characters, Kangming Gu family. "The divine artifact is reacting," Ye Cheng murmured, his eyes narrowing. "It senses the bloodline of the Gu clan on that vessel. Let's see. It appears to be a small settlement called Jianglin City." On the deck of the spirit boat, the red-robed elder of the Gu clan, his white beard curling gracefully, peered at the glowing terrain map hovering before him. A sharp gleam flickered in his eyes. "Change our course," he commanded. "There's nothing else of interest here. We'll make directly for Jianglin City and check on our Gu family branch there." He tapped his staff against the deck. "And mark this well. If anyone dares to threaten a single member of our clan, show them no mercy. Eliminate the threat and reinforce our Jianglin branch immediately." "Yes, Elder," came the unified response. A surge of confidence rippled through the cultivators aboard. Their laughter rang out, brimming with fighting spirit, as the spirit boat adjusted its sails and set its heading for the Gu family's stronghold in Jianglin City. Chapter 96. Jianglin City is our destination. Prepare to disembark. The spirit boat bearing the Kangming-gu crest sailed swiftly through the heavens, coming to rest among the drifting clouds above Jianglan City. Aboard the vessel, clan leader Gu Hong maintained a composed air as he issued silent orders to his stationed monks. When the boat settled, he stepped down onto the plank, flanked by a group of young recruits. They were no ordinary Gu clan prodigies. These youths had been handpicked by Gu Hong himself from the spirit realm, and even from the mortal world, and drawn away from distant branches of the family. At the Gu estate's main gate, Gu Hong paused to gather his calm, then spoke his name clearly to the guards. Recognition flickered in their eyes, and they hastily opened the doors. Within moments, he was led into the reception hall, where servants bustled about in eager preparation. A page darted off to summon the clan's elders. Word spread swiftly. The senior members, Zhang Lianxin, Bai Heng, and the younger elders, had only just returned from their secluded cultivation at Mengyo Spring. Now, with Gu Hong's arrival and his selection of promising newcomers, the Grand Gu family was on the brink of a momentous gathering. Elder Gu Zhongyuan had long since relinquished any hope of further advancement himself. Generously, he'd passed the Mengyuquan quota down to the next generation, letting a younger scion oversee the family's affairs. So when a trusted servant hurried in, eyes wide with astonishment, to report, "Master, a cultivator from our clan has arrived, and he's a King Realm expert," Elder Gu Zhongyuan sat bolt upright. "A King Realm cultivator?" he repeated, brow arching. Only days ago, he'd felt the stirring of the holy bloodline within him, a subtle awakening that left him both excited and apprehensive. Could this unexpected visitor be connected to Gu Hong's rumored identity? Without hesitation, he ordered the servant to escort the newcomer to the reception hall. Inside the grand, lantern-lit chamber, a group of promising youths from the family's distant branches had already gathered, each one personally brought by Gu Hong to assess the situation in Jianglan City. These young talents eyed their host branch with warm familiarity. After all, the Jianglan branch shared their humble origins, quiet, isolated, and often overlooked. It was only natural they'd feel a bond, as though they were kindred spirits who, like them, staked their claims on the fringes of power. But standing apart, Ye Cheng felt none of that easy camaraderie. He knew better than to overestimate the odds of a true prodigy emerging from a peripheral branch. Small branches simply didn't produce many geniuses, certainly not King Realm masters. As he watched the assembled youngsters whisper and nod among themselves, he steeled his expression. Whatever Gu Hong's motives, whatever secrets this city held, he wouldn't let sentiment cloud his judgment. He was here for one purpose, to uncover the truth behind the Gu family's sudden awakening, and to stake his own claim in its unfolding destiny. Though he served as the guiding elder of Kangming's main branch, Elder Gu Yexuan was duty-bound to treat every offshoot impartially and lend support wherever it was needed. His standing within the clan depended not only on how many prodigies he trained, but also on the quality of their talent. Ye Cheng understood this principle clearly, but that knowledge did little to lift the weight in his chest as he waited. He took a steadying breath and straightened his posture the moment Elder Gu Yexuan entered the reception hall. Though Ye Cheng had the bearing of a king-level cultivator, he bowed respectfully. "Brother Yexuan," he said, his tone measured yet sincere, "I apologize for dropping in unannounced." Elder Gu Yexuan paused in mild surprise at the show of deference, then regarded Ye Cheng more closely. Both of them felt that familiar thrum of Saint Clan bloodline resonance, an unspoken bond that drew them nearer, even as formality kept their distance. After a beat, the elder man offered a gentle nod and motioned for Ye Cheng to rise. Once they were seated, Elder Gu Yexuan opened the conversation. "You wished to see me, Changqing. Excuse me, Ye Cheng. What is it you have in mind?" Ye Cheng met his gaze without hesitation. "I'd like to propose that we bring the most promising geniuses from each branch back to the main seat for advanced training. With guidance from both of us, they could reach new heights, and the branches would benefit from the achievements of their champions." Elder Gu Yexuan listened in silence. His sharp eyes softened as he took in Ye Cheng's earnest expression. The idea was ambitious, but it struck at the heart of what their clan needed: unity and shared strength. After a moment, the elder inclined his head. Your suggestion carries wisdom, and I can see you've given it careful thought. Very well. Let us discuss the details. With that, the two Saint Realm cultivators leaned forward, forging together a plan that would reshape Kangming's future. Chapter 5. A Hesitant Alliance. The Great Elder pressed his fingers against his temples, warding off the throbbing headache that had settled in over the last hour. In the old days, back when the Jianglan Gu clan was still a minor branch, he would have leapt at any opportunity to claim the Kangming main vein. No need to wait for the Patriarch's return, nor to consult young Master Ye Cheng. He could have summoned the promising juniors immediately and let them compete to earn Gu Hong's favor. But times had changed. The Kangming vein no longer held the same fascination for the Jianglan Gu, now an emergent powerhouse under Ye Cheng, the newly anointed emperor. And only days ago, Ye Cheng himself had slain 4 god emperors in a single decisive confrontation, garnering acclaim that outshone any achievement of the clan's lesser scions. If Gu Hong insisted on the talent examination he'd proposed, none of the younger generation would dare follow him. Why would they, when even the clan's own master offered greater prestige? Thus the Great Elder chose his words with utmost care. "This matter is indeed of great importance," he said, bowing slightly. "It is not that I refuse your request, Lord Gu Hong, yet it is not mine alone to decide. We must await the return of our Patriarch and young Master Ye Cheng before making any formal arrangements." Gu Hong's expression tightened. A flicker of impatience crossed his features. In his eyes, the Jianglan Gu's reluctance seemed no different from that of any other minor branch he'd encountered on his journeys. Endless politicking and delay tactics. Still, he forced a polite smile. "Very well," he replied evenly. "I shall await their decision. But time, as you know, is of the essence. I trust the Jianglan Gu will not tarry too long." The Great Elder inclined his head again, though inside he felt a pang of doubt. Could he really buy more time? He could only hope that both Patriarch and young Master would return swiftly, lest Gu Hong grow weary of waiting, and decide to take matters into his own hands. The clansmen were acting predictably short-sighted. At last, they'd uncovered a true genius, and now they were desperate to hold on to him, afraid of losing their prize. Ye Cheng stifled a wry smile behind his calm facade. After all, he was from the Kangming main branch, overseen directly by the emperor ancestor. Were these minor branches really so bold as to poach talent from the heart of the clan? Still, he understood their anxiety. He'd seen countless branch families split apart over lesser disputes, so he had no trouble empathizing with their fears. With an easy smile, Ye Cheng finally spoke. "By all means, don't worry. Before I set out on this journey, the emperor ancestor himself made one thing clear. If any promising member from one of the branches wishes to join us, we will give them every opportunity to grow. If they aren't willing, we won't force them," Ye Cheng said reassuringly. "Besides, once the main branch has finished their cultivation, these Decept-less can return to their branch family and repay their debts when they've succeeded," he went on. "And regardless of whether they accept our invitation, we'll grant them elixirs and spirit medicines based on their talent test results, so their gifts won't go to waste." He turned to the elderly steward. "Brother, don't worry. Even though the head and the young master of the Jianglan branch haven't returned yet, let me conduct the talent tests on the Jianglan youngsters today. If any of them passes, we'll simply wait for their branch head's approval. Should he consent, I'll personally escort the chosen disciples to the main branch." His meaning was plain. If none of the Jianglan youths proved worthy, he would depart immediately to avoid suspicion or wasted time. The elder's lip twitched as he finally bowed his head. "Very well," he murmured. He'd intended all along to spare Gu Hong any embarrassment. After all, when the younger generation at home passed their exams one by one, none of them was eager to serve in the main branch of the family, leaving the senior elder with his pride bruised. Everyone knew the Gu clan of Jianglan had risen to become one of the most prestigious families in the land. Dispatching such talented youths to court would be a real loss. Though still young, each of the juniors understood this perfectly. Only Gu Hong had completely misread his intentions. After a moment's reflection, the patriarch sighed and reluctantly agreed to Gu Hong's proposal. Gu Hong had argued so forcefully that a second refusal would have been nothing less than disrespectful. And if, in the end, the appointment didn't suit them, the elder could always tell the youngsters that once they passed the examination, there was no need to rush into a decision. Everything would be settled upon Master and young Lord Ye Cheng's return. Content with this compromise, the elder of the Gu family inclined his head to Gu Hong's suggestion and instructed his attendants to summon all the younger members of the clan. Gu Ling, Gu Yuan, and Gu Wangshuan were the only 3 junior leaders of the Gu family present, aside from Yunqi's older siblings who hadn't even been summoned. Their natural talent exempted them from any trial, and in any case, the head of the family and the young master would never agree to let them go. But Elder Gu Hong saw this gathering as the perfect chance to assess the true potential of Gu Ling and his 2 companions. All 3 had entered the Dream Spring alongside Gu Ye Cheng, yet their progress hadn't been nearly as remarkable as that of Gu Yunxi or Gu Qingchen. They'd only just broken into the 8th and 9th levels of true spirit cultivation. After undergoing the essence and marrow purification, however, their innate aptitude had soared, and now Gu Hong intended to put those improvements to the test. As the trio of aspirants stepped forward, Gu Hong wasted no time. With a graceful flick of his sleeve, he produced a single, radiant feather, the sacred weapon he'd brought from the Kangming branch of the Gu family, which hovered in the air before him. In the great hall of the Kangming Gu clan, 108 gleaming feathers were displayed in perfect rows, each one a sacred conduit for detecting the pure blood of a clan member. At the center of the chamber stood Gu Hong, a single feather suffused with starlight resting in his hand. This special plume was renowned throughout the main vein for its ability to gauge a disciple's innate talent. Gu Hong raised the starlit feather and announced, his voice calm but carrying through the hushed assembly, "This feather can light up to 81 stars. Should it ignite 10 stars, you pass the basic test. At 20 stars, the God King of our main vein will personally accept you as a disciple. And if you can reach 30... A ripple of excitement swept through the candidates from the branch families, but Gu Ye Cheng and his companions from Jianglin City exchanged bored, skeptical glances. One of the branch clan prodigies, however, could not contain his enthusiasm. 30 stars? He whispered to his student beside him. That means you'll be placed under the direct tutelage of our emperor-level ancestors. Remember, even the greatest saints in recent generations never managed more than 38 or 39 stars. Gu Hong offered a knowing smile, letting the implication hang in the air. The group he had led into the hall stood silently stunned. Among them, the most talented, Gu Qianshui, had only ever achieved 22 stars. None had ever witnessed the 30-star threshold, let alone surpassed it. Now the air was thick with anticipation. All eyes turned to the feather in Gu Hong's hand, waiting to see which young disciple would dare attempt the impossible. Gu Qianshui's lineage was the most prestigious among all the juniors gathered. Most of the others came from obscure branches, much like the Jianglin Gu family, but Qianshui's branch had recently begun to flourish. They might lack a god king, but a heavenly king ancestor guided them, and that influence was enough to propel Qianshui to her current heights. Even so, the gap between these rising branches and the saints of the main Kangming vein remained immense. Quiet envy simmered among the branch family geniuses, each longing secretly for the honor of the main vein. Gu Ling and her friends exchanged satisfied glances. They claimed no real interest in the main Kangming vein, yet they couldn't hide their excitement at the prospect of putting their own strength to the test against those saints. Just as they were about to step forward and begin the trial, a familiar voice called out from beyond the courtyard gates. "Grandpa, what are you doing here? I saw Sister Ling and Brother Yuan arrive. Why didn't you send someone to fetch us?" Gu Ye Cheng strode into the courtyard, eyebrows raised in mock reproach, fully male and full of boyish curiosity. The gathered juniors paused, their anticipation mingling with amusement at his unexpected entrance. Chapter 97. Why is everyone off having fun without inviting us? Grandpa, that's so unfair. Qingchen, Yunqi, what are you two doing here? At the entrance to the main hall, Gu Qingchen and Gu Yunqi poked their heads around the doorframe, curiosity shining in their eyes. The branch geniuses standing behind Gu Hong froze, then stared at the pair in astonishment. The young ladies, especially Gu Xianxia, covered their mouths, captivated by how delicate and pretty the siblings looked. Aren't they just adorable? It makes you wonder what their parents must be like. Excited whispers spread through the crowd. Qingchen and Yunxi, caught off guard by the sudden attention, hesitated, until Gu Hong cleared his throat sharply. In an instant, the murmurs died down and everyone snapped back to attention. The two children hurriedly bowed to Gu Hong and the others, then skipped to the end of the line, squeezing in between the taller cultivators. An elderly attendant watched them with a bemused shake of his head. You two don't even know what you're queuing for, do you? But with so many people lined up here, there must be something interesting going on. Might as well stick around and see what happens. The elder leaned back, gave a wry smile, and shook his head. Don't worry about it, he said. This is just a formality. If those two youngsters want to spar, let them. Next. One after another, the Gu family's young disciples stepped forward. Each took the sky feather that Gu Hong had produced and poured their own spiritual power into it. For most of them, the feather glowed with only 5 or 6 stars. Lighting up 7 was already a rarity. Even Gu Ling, Gu Yuan, and Gu Wangzuan could muster only 9 stars each, but that was thanks to their progress in the Mengyou fist, which cleansed their tendons and marrow and thus elevated their innate potential. Without those techniques, their results would have been far weaker. None of this discouraged the others, though. They knew their talents well enough. Within Zhonglin City they might shine, but beyond its walls, countless cultivators far surpassed them. So they trained with renewed fervor, determined to overcome any shortcomings through sheer hard work. Ever since young Master Ye Cheng made his name known throughout the clan, Gu Ling and the others had redoubled their cultivation efforts. They were determined to make the most of every opportunity, every spirit pill that he generously provided. As for the looming qualification test and the chance to enter the Kangming main vein, they paid it almost no mind. If they failed, so be it, and even if they passed, they had no intention of going. They believed that remaining close to the clan and learning directly under young Master Ye Cheng would accelerate their progress far more than any foray into the main vein. Looks like nobody passed after all, one of the junior disciples murmured, scanning the disappointed faces before him. The younger generation, clustered behind Gu Hong, exchanged glances of smug satisfaction. They had predicted that the Zhonglin branch would be shut out entirely, and their prediction had come true. Yet they were surprised by how little dejection showed on Gu Ling and her peers' faces. No one threw tantrums or cast blame. Most remarkable of all was Gu Qianshui. She was the first to step forward beside Gu Hong, her calm composure never wavering as she began organizing support for her fellow branch members. Gather up your things, Gu Qianshui called out, her voice steady. We'll review the test exercises together and work on our weaknesses. There's no shame in failure, only in not trying again. One by one, the Zhonglin disciples lifted their heads. Though they had lost the chance to enter the Kangming main vein this time, the solidarity and guidance of their branch leaders made them feel more determined than ever. Under young Master Ye Cheng's unseen but ever-present influence, they resolved to train harder and rise stronger, ready to seize whatever comes next. All around me, I saw bright young prodigies from the Brank H families, shoulders hunched in defeat, faces pale with regret, and some even breaking down in tears at their failure. To flunk this exam was to forfeit a coveted place in the imperial force and the prestige of becoming one of its scions. A few tried to look composed, but their trembling hands and quivering lips gave them away. Only Gu Ling and the others stood serenely at ease, as if they hadn't even registered the gravity of what they'd lost. Perhaps they simply couldn't perceive the magnitude of this missed opportunity. Master Gu Hong, meanwhile, paid no heed to anyone's expressions. He stared at the glowing result display. No candidates had passed, and shook his head with a long, reluctant sigh. He had warned us beforehand. Lighting all 10 trial stars was an almost impossible feat for a mere regional branch. Still, seeing the zeros in bright red made even a veteran's heart sink. At that moment, a sudden stir behind us drew everyone's attention. Bounding forward with an eager grin was Gu Ye Cheng, the last of our group. "It's my turn. My turn," he called out, eyes shining with excitement. "Grandpa, could you please hand me the feather?" At the sight of little Ye Cheng's eager face, Elder Gu Hong and the assembled branch prodigies all came back to themselves. Watching the boy's innocent excitement, they couldn't help but smile. Touched, Gu Hong leaned forward and passed the crystal feather into Ye Cheng's outstretched hand. "All right, little one," he said kindly. "But don't be discouraged if you don't pass the test. You're still young. Your aptitude will only grow stronger with time." Elder Gu Hong couldn't bear to dampen the child's spirits, so he offered what he meant as gentle encouragement. Yet as his words drifted across the courtyard, the expressions of the nearby clan elders and of Gu Ling and the other onlookers turned puzzled. Fail the test? They wondered. It was understandable for those whose talents truly lagged behind, but Ye Cheng. They all exchanged uneasy glances. Meanwhile, Ye Cheng rested his chubby little hand on the feather. In an instant, a surge of spiritual energy welled up inside him and poured into the crystal plume. The feather began to glow with soft, pulsing light, just the beginning of what promised to be an extraordinary trial. Buzz! The sky feather in Ye Cheng's hand trembled and hummed, suddenly erupting in dazzling starlight. Tiny points of light winked into existence around it. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. Gu Hong and the rest watched in stunned silence as Ye Cheng's expression grew steely. He poured every ounce of his spiritual power into the feather, and in mere heartbeats the count leapt higher and higher. 60 stars, someone whispered. Before their incredulous eyes, the sky feather now blazed with a full complement of 60 stars of pure, unadulterated talent. It was an achievement so extraordinary that the onlookers could scarcely believe it. Chapter 98. A stunned silence fell over the assembly. Gu Hong and the others gaped as Ye Cheng raised the celestial feather high, its silvery quills pulsing with starlight. Around it, 60 brilliant points of light coalesced into a miniature constellation, spinning slowly in midair. Then, as if drawn back into themselves, the stars winked out one by one, leaving nothing but the feather's faint glow. Slowly, murmurs rippled through the crowd. They had been certain the Jianglin branch would be routed, its talent deficit too great to overcome. Yet here stood this unassuming youth, whom no one had taken seriously, revealing an ability so extraordinary it dwarfed every expectation. 60 stars, someone whispered. Unheard of. Even Xianxia, long proud of her own gift, felt her pulse race. She had watched the Kangming main branch's finest, Saint Sun with 39 stars, Saint Daughter with 38, light up the heavens one after another, and thought herself on track to match them through hard work alone. But now, witnessing Ye Cheng's unprecedented achievement, excitement and envy tangled in her chest, and she forced herself to calm down, blinking as if to dispel the impossibility of what she'd just seen. Everyone around him froze. They had all thought Ye Cheng was merely a cute, unremarkable boy. After all, no one in the Jianglin branch had ever broken past 10 stars. Yet before their eyes, he had just illuminated 60 stars on his spirit grid in one breathtaking instant. A stunned silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by murmurs of disbelief. The normally unflappable Gu Hong's jaw dropped. His heart thundered in his chest as one thought echoed over and over. 60 stars! A 60-star genius! Leaning forward, Gu Hong could hardly contain his excitement. "I can't believe we discovered a monster like you," he breathed. "Our Gu family, our holy clan, finally has hope of revival." He swallowed, steadying himself. Though his strength and composure were considerable, he felt as if he might burst into cheers at any moment. Recovering his poise, he reached out as if to grasp Ye Cheng's shoulder. "Tell me your name, young man. Truly, your talent surpasses even the top prodigies at our Kangming main branch. If you're willing to transfer to the main branch, I guarantee they'll honor you as the Holy Son." But Ye Cheng, face calm and eyes clear, shook his head. He offered no words, only a gentle, polite refusal, uninterested in the offer that had sent the entire Jianglin branch into a frenzy. Ye Cheng gave a respectful bow to the old man and shook his head. "Thank you for your kindness, grandfather, but I must still wait for my parents' decision on where I'll cultivate." "All right, Brother Yunxi, your turn." He stepped down with a wave of his hand and motioned to the boy standing nearby. "Yunxi?" All eyes shifted from Ye Cheng to Gu Yunxi. With calm assurance, Yunxi climbed onto the raised platform and took the Tianyu feather from Ye Cheng's outstretched palm. He closed his eyes, summoned his spiritual power, and channeled it directly into the enchanted feather. Immediately, a soft buzzing filled the hall. The feather trembled in Yunxi's grasp as if awakening, its surface suddenly alight with hundreds of tiny stars. A faint but undeniable energy rippled outward, drawing every disciple to silent attention. It was the very same phenomenon they'd witnessed when Ye Cheng had infused his own power moments before. One by one, the stars on Yunxi's feather blinked into view, 10, 20, 30, 40. Within seconds, the count soared past 60, eclipsing Ye Cheng's previous mark, and still it climbed. The assembled cultivators stood entranced as the mystical light grew ever brighter, heralding a truly remarkable display of talent. At last, the reading settled on 81 stars. 81! A full-star genius! Gu Hong's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He stared at Gu Ye Cheng, as if he'd just seen a ghost. This feather was the Gu family's most treasured heirloom, a sacred artifact forged by a venerable realm patriarch in the clan's golden age. To ignite all its stars meant possessing talent worthy of that very peak, a gift of the highest order, someone destined to reach the venerable realm itself. The spectators around him stood frozen in disbelief. Gu Ye Cheng, however, was positively glowing. He cast a triumphant look at his brother and teased, "Hope you don't mind living in my shadow from now on, dummy brother." Remarkable. Simply remarkable. Gu Hong managed at last, his voice trembling with awe as he stepped forward to reclaim the feather. But the moment it touched his palm, his face went pale again. Etched along its quill was a clean, unmistakable crack. How, and why, had the sacred feather been damaged? Gu Ye Cheng jerked his head up, staring in shock at his younger sister, Gu Yunxi. She stood over him, with her fists planted firmly on her hips, an almost smug look on her face, even as the shattered fragments of his sacred blade lay scattered at her feet. His heart pounded. That holy weapon had an 81-star ceiling. Everyone knew no one could exceed it. Yet she had done more than that. She'd outright smashed it. What kind of prodigy was Gu Yunxi? Terror and exhilaration warred inside him. The heavens truly favored the Gu clan. First, their Kangming lineage patriarch had broken through to the imperial realm. Now, two hidden jewels, siblings whose potential dwarfed any they'd ever seen, had surfaced together. Elder Gu Hong, watching from the sidelines, could barely contain his excitement. Discoveries like this were the stuff of legends. He simply couldn't wait for the head of the Zhonglin branch to return. As soon as he did, Gu Yunxi and Gu Ye Cheng would be sent back to the Kangming main line, where their ancient ancestor could personally sculpt their talents into true masterpieces. As the Yunxi siblings' extraordinary talents left Gu Hong and his companions reeling, a sudden whoosh of wind cut through the sky. On the distant cloud sea, several figures appeared in swift succession. At their forefront was Emperor Xuan, accompanied by Gu Ye Cheng, Gu Yuan, and the rest, returning from Xuantian Palace. They had planned to discuss Gu Ye Cheng's imminent journey to Qianyu when the emperor suddenly halted, her brow knitting in concern. Below, within Gu's estate in Zhonglin City, an unfamiliar, king-level aura pulsed through the air, an energy Emperor Xuan recognized at once. In that same instant, Gu Hong felt the shift. He lifted his head, eyes sweeping to the figures hovering above. The moment his gaze met Emperor Xuan's, his pupils constricted in stunned recognition. Chapter 99. The aura of an Emperor Realm cultivator is both profound and unyielding. If the might of a King Realm master is like drifting clouds and mist, then the aura of an Emperor Realm warrior is forged steel and unbreakable iron. Even a faint ripple of that power feels as vast and immovable as a mountain, enough to crush any foe from the King Realm or below. The ancient progenitor of the Kangming Gu family was said to possess such terrifying strength. Yet now, hovering on the sea of clouds, a lone female cultivator's presence rivaled and even eclipsed his legendary might. Gu Hong's breath caught in his throat. He had never sensed power like this, not even from the Gu family's founding ancestor. His heart pounded as he glanced toward Xuan Huang's side, where Gu Ye Cheng stood in silent confidence. The young king had not exchanged a single word with this mysterious woman, and still she radiated authority so absolute that Emperor Realm veterans knelt before her without hesitation. Even from a distance, her aura felt as if it might tear the heavens asunder. "Who is she?" Gu Hong whispered, voice trembling. "How can an Emperor Realm powerhouse bow before her so readily? And what secret tie binds her to His Majesty's young king?" Swallowing hard, he forced himself to speak up, unwilling to let this startling mystery go unanswered. He bowed toward the sky and spoke with perfect courtesy. "Gu Hong greets you, Senior. May I humbly request your advice?" "Senior?" At Gu Hong's words, Gu Xianxia and the other branch prodigies looked up in astonishment. To be called senior by someone of Gu Hong's stature, the newcomer above them must eclipse even the king realm in power. But before they could fully process their shock, two figures streaked down from the clouds. "Father! Grandfather! You've returned!" Gu Qingchen and Gu Yunxi landed gracefully at the feet of the newcomer and threw themselves into his embrace, their delight unmistakable. "Huh?" Gu Hong and the other onlookers froze, jaws dropping. Had they heard correctly? The young king who'd just been paid such deference by an emperor-level powerhouse was none other than the father and the grandfather of Jianglin Gu's two peerless prodigies? That revelation alone would have been staggering enough. Yet as Gu Hong stared at the figure standing before him, his refined bearing, the aura of supreme cultivation, it all but robbed him of his senses. Could this truly be Ye Cheng, the illustrious head of the Jianglin Gu family, and the celebrated young master whose name filled every corner of the realm? Ye Cheng, Gu Qianshui, and the others suddenly snapped back to reality. A collective shudder ran through them as they watched the Yunxi siblings drifting down from the clouds toward Ye Cheng, and then it struck them. Wait, they're walking on air? And those two little kids are already king-level powerhouses? Silence fell, utter, overwhelming silence. In that moment, not even Gu Hong could keep his nerves steady. How old are the Yunxi siblings? 5 or 6 at most, and yet these children had already attained king-level strength? Admittedly, they showed astonishing potential, but this was beyond anything they'd imagined. Even the geniuses from Gu Qianshui's branch were rendered speechless. Gu Hong felt a bitter pang in his chest. He recalled the day the ancestor of the Kongming Gu clan first broke into the imperial realm. How proud he'd been. Back then, his personal goal had been to reach the late Xuan King realm. And now here stood these two youngsters, suspended in midair. The aura radiating from big sister Gu Yunxi was so refined and powerful that Gu Hong was certain she'd already mastered the Xuan King realm to perfection. People are so competitive that they're always being sized up against each other, Gu Hong mused. And just like a river, where each new wave pushes the last aside, there's always someone stronger waiting in the wings. Yet when I look at those two young prodigies, Gu Qingchen and Gu Yunxi, even the so-called saints of the main branch, the Ge, geniuses and monsters they praise, seem pale by comparison. It's astonishing. Ye Cheng regarded him quietly. Indeed, Gu Hong was renowned as one of the Gu family's foremost elites, a true peerless talent. Steeling himself with a deep breath, Gu Hong bowed respectfully. "Master Gu," he began, voice steady, "I have come regarding the Gu family's branch in Kangming King City, Qianyu." They spoke at length, and by the end of their conversation, surprise crossed Ye Cheng's features. He had been planning a journey to Qianyu to investigate news of the Nalan clan and to check on his sister. He had never expected that the first Gu family cultivator to attain the imperial realm would already be stationed there. "This changes everything," Ye Cheng said, quiet resolve in his tone. "I will accompany you to Qianyu." He rose, inclining his head to Gu Hong. "Allow me some time to settle affairs here. Father Gu Yuan will oversee the household in my absence." With that, Ye Cheng turned and walked toward the estate gates, his mind already racing with preparations for the journey ahead. Compared with Ye Cheng's practiced indifference, his father Gu Yuan and Gu Hong were all but inseparable in conversation. Gu Yuan had always held clan friendships in high regard, and as they spoke, he discovered from Gu Hong that the Kangming Gu and Jianglin Gu lines actually shared the same origin, the direct bloodline descending from the very first ancestor of the Gu clan. At the clan's height, there had been multiple Tianzun founders, each spawning its own line. Over the millennia, hundreds of collateral branches had proliferated, yet only a handful of bloodlines retained unbroken descent from that original patriarch. It was, in fact, a stroke of fate that these two rare direct lines should find one another again, just as the great Gu clan was entering a long twilight. Ancient records even noted an especially close relationship between the Kangming Gu and the Jiangling Gu in the clan's golden age, so Gu Yuan and Gu Hong naturally felt an instant kinship. Their talk grew ever more animated, and at last Gu Hong could no longer contain his curiosity. He looked toward Gu Ye Cheng and asked, "Young Master Ye Cheng, what cultivation realm have you reached?" Gu Hong's eyes widened. "You mean even the most formidable figures in the imperial realm, all those exalted cultivators, bow to him with unwavering loyalty?" When Gu Yuan heard the question, he hesitated. After a moment's thought, he decided there was no point in holding back. Soon enough, Gu Hong and the others would uncover everything about the Gu family's recent upheavals. Better to speak frankly, so he began. "Our family's secrets aren't simple, but since you're here, you deserve the truth." As Gu Yuan spoke, Gu Hong became visibly restless. He'd heard rumors about Gu Ye Cheng, the young master of the Zhonglin branch, but the reality surpassed every whisper. Gu Ye Cheng, barely 25, had already achieved the rank of Supreme God King and stood poised to break into the imperial level. Legend said he had slain an emperor with a single palm strike. Even more incredible, Xuan Huang, a towering titan of the divine emperor realm, had cast aside his own ambitions to swear fealty to Gu Ye Cheng. Each of these feats alone would have shaken the foundations of the mighty Kangming Gu clan, if not all of Qianyu. Yet they all converged on one man. Gu Hong felt as though he'd been reading from a celestial chronicle rather than listening to a living, breathing youth. The grandeur of Gu Ye Cheng's accomplishments and the way the empire's mightiest cultivators knelt before him left Gu Hong reeling. He closed his mouth, stunned, caught between incredulity and awe. In that charged silence, one fact crystallized in his mind. Whatever else lay ahead, Gu Ye Cheng's rise was unstoppable. Gu Hong couldn't keep himself from laughing at his own arrogance at the way he'd overestimated his branch's strength. The Kangming Gu family had always prided itself on being the main line of the Holy Gu clan, the strongest of the surviving bloodlines. Yet standing before him now was proof to the contrary. The Zhonglin Gu family, backed by young Master Gu Ye Cheng and their divine emperor protector, was incomparably more powerful. He finally understood why the Zhonglin elder had greeted him with such serene indifference. Against a faction that boasted both an emperor realm prodigy and a celestial guardian, Gu Hong's own emperor rank cultivation was but a trifle. Even the territory young master Gu Ye Cheng had recently swept clean, destroying the Kanglan sanctuary, was more formidable than anything the Kangming Gu family could claim. Seeing the scales fall from his eyes, Gu Hong abandoned his long-held plan to lure Gu Yunxi and Gu Qingqian into his branch. If those two untapped geniuses were stuck under his banner, their potential would only be squandered. He wouldn't dare hinder their growth again. Not long after, a breathless messenger burst into the hall, bowing until his brow nearly scraped the floor. "My lord," he gasped, "urgent news from Jianglin Manor." Gu Hong's eyes snapped open. "What is it?" "Young Master Ye Cheng is really heading to Qianyu to visit the Kangming King's city? And he's even taking Yunxi and Qingqian with him?" Gu Yuan's solemn question hung in the air. Gu Hong let out a long breath, his heart soaring. This was better news than he dared hope for. At that moment, high above Wangqin Island, a graceful spirit boat lifted quietly into the sky. It was the farewelling vessel sent by the island's senior Gu clan officials. On board stood Elder Gu Jie of the Kangming Gu family. He waved dismissively to those below. No formal see-off was needed, then guided the boat toward the sea of clouds. Before turning fully away, Gu Jie cast one last glance at Gu Qinger, who stood poised on the island's edge. A thrill of triumph lit his eyes, far more intensely than Gu Hong's excitement back in Jianglin City. "I never expected this, to find such a prodigy in this small, secluded realm," he murmured to himself with deep satisfaction. "Truly, I've been fortunate on this trip." In Gu Hong's delegation, there wasn't a single genuine mainline prodigy, only branch family scions, a handful of devoted worshippers, and a few deacons. By contrast, Guji's party included, alongside the accompanying monks, 3 outstanding disciples drawn directly from the Kangming main branch. This advantage came down to the Tianyu, Kangming Gu's sacred talent-detecting stones, of which very few exist. Gu Hong had used his power and influence to claim the prized Starry Sky Feather, an artifact capable of instantly gauging a person's aptitude. Gu Jie, long at odds with him, fared slightly worse. He could only secure a standard Tianyu, which can register nothing more than pure Gu family bloodlines. To make up for it, he brought along his 3 mainline prodigies. Without the precision of a Starry Sky Feather, Gu Jie had to rely on these elite disciples to probe the potential of the branch family geniuses. The rules were simple. Any branch family hopeful who could survive 3 successive matchups against a mainline talent would earn a passing grade. When a branch family prodigy dares to challenge a main branch genius, etiquette demands that the main branch cultivator voluntarily suppress his cultivation until it matches the challenger's level. This rule, meant to ensure no one wins simply by virtue of a higher realm, sounds fair on paper, but it makes it nearly impossible to assess a branch prodigy's true strength. Ye Cheng, however, proved himself an extraordinary exception. After Gu Jie conducted the customary test, he was convinced. Even if Ye Cheng's innate talent didn't quite match that of the Kangming Gu family's current saint heirs, the gap could be no more than a hair's breadth. Ye Cheng didn't merely survive a few skirmishes with a main branch genius. In a single perfectly executed move, he obliterated the strongest of the 3 main branch fighters Gu Jie had assembled. Not one of the others, neither the remaining 2 main branch geniuses nor Gu Jie himself, could hide their astonishment. In all of Gu Jie's scouting trips to branch lineages, cultivators capable of enduring 5 consecutive techniques from a main branch genius were so rare they could be counted on one hand. Defeating one outright? It was practically unheard of, until today. Ye Cheng could hardly contain his excitement. He had just witnessed a true prodigy, someone capable of defeating an opponent with a single flawless move. After the last expedition, when his old rival Gu Hong had outshone him, and he'd returned with nothing more than a mediocre Tianyu, Ye Cheng had felt thoroughly humiliated. Now, satisfaction gleamed in his eyes. Before they'd set out on this mission, Ye Cheng had been feeling low, and so he'd wagered a king-tier elixir against Gu Hong, certain he'd lose. Fate, however, took a remarkable turn. He discovered the young genius Gu Chinger. Clutching the Starry Sky Feather in his hand, he shot a confident look over his shoulder. "Brother Gu Hong," he called into the spirit web, "did you really think that as long as you held the Starry Sky Feather, you'd be guaranteed to find a prodigy?" He glanced back at Gu Chinger, whose calm composure only fueled his anticipation. He was itching to reunite with Gu Hong and watch his rival's expression when he unveiled this exceptional talent. With that thought, Ye Cheng infused the Starry Sky Feather with his spiritual power. The feather glowed briefly, then pointed the way to Gu Hong's whereabouts. Opening his eyes, he gave a sharp salute to his companions. "Let's move. Full speed," he ordered. In an instant, the group surged forward, eager to celebrate their unexpected victory. "Make sure you reach Elder Gu Hong's camp by nightfall and meet with him in person." One of the riders laughed. "I can't wait to see the look on that old man's face when we arrive. He's going to be priceless, ha-ha!" "Understood," the others replied in unison. Chapter 100. Gu Jie was positively brimming with anticipation, and the same spark gleamed in Gu Chinger's eyes as she walked just behind him. When she'd first heard that a representative of the main branch of the Kangming Gu clan was arriving, she'd been momentarily stunned. Still, after turning it over in her mind countless times, she decided to accept Gu Jie's invitation. In his estimation, with her innate talent, she would almost certainly be taken in for formal training once she returned to the main lineage, and might even garner guidance from the Emperor's ancestral masters. The very thought set Gu Chinger's heart racing. To most cultivators, the vast non-high of 10,000 ores seemed limitless. To Gu Chinger, however, it already felt constricting, a cage on her ambitions. She refused to squander her prime years here. She was determined to close the gap between herself and Ye Cheng. Recalling Brother Ye Cheng's serene bearing that day, and the whispers she had since heard about his accomplishments, Gu Chinger felt a thrill of both excitement and dread. With his extraordinary talent, his current strength far outstripped hers. If she didn't exert herself to the utmost, she might never even catch a glimpse of him again. Deep down, she hardly dared hope she could ever truly catch up to Ye Cheng, but she pledged to try. Gu Qinger refused to stay weak. She longed to close the gap between herself and Ye Cheng, so that whenever he glanced back, he'd see her and remember he had a sister. With the Kangming Gu clan's main line headed by an Emperor Realm Patriarch, this felt like her best opportunity. Stepping into that wider world would let her pursue her ambitions with confidence. Beside her, Gu Xie, who'd also passed the trial, remained silent, but her heart beat with the same determination. High above the sea of clouds, the spirit boat cleaved the mist, racing toward Jianglin City under Gu Jie's command. On the city's far side, Gu Yecheng was already overseeing clan affairs. He planned to journey to the Kangming Gu family in Qianyu to pay respects to the emperor ancestor and assess the branch's condition. As a member of the Gu family, he was keen to offer his help wherever it was needed, much as Gu Hong and the others had supported various branches on their travels. With the Kangming Gu as his entry point, Ye Cheng's path into the wider world was set. Now that Gu Yecheng had set foot in Qianyu, he would no longer grope his way forward. He could cut out detours, gather information more efficiently, and, most importantly, focus on his original mission. Uncover the Nalan family's secrets and find his sister, Nalan Qingyuan. "I'll be relying on you for the next few days," he confessed, a note of guilt in his voice. Zhang Lianxin's hand instinctively went to her swelling belly. She was due to give birth to their third daughter any day now and couldn't undertake a long journey. Until the baby arrived, she would have to stay at the Gu residence. Though anxious to remain by his side, she understood how vital his task was. She gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, my husband. I'll stay here and keep everything safe." Gu Yecheng nodded, voice low but firm. "I promise I'll return before our daughter is born." With his wife settled, he turned to Xuanhuang. Protected by the Tianlian god puppet, Xuanhuang didn't need to accompany him on this mission. It was far more important for him to remain within the clan and oversee affairs at Xuanqian Palace. "Once I depart, I'll have to impose on Xuanhuang to stay at the Gu residence." Gu Yecheng inclined his head respectfully. Xuang hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes, but she summoned her composure, clasped her fists, and replied earnestly, "Please rest assured, Taoist Gu." Zhang Lianxin, standing at Xuanhuang's side, noticed the Empress's reluctance and gently spoke up. "Sister Xuan, would you consider lodging with me instead?" Xuanhuang's eyes widened in surprise. As a cultivator, she was trained to be cautious, yet she found herself unable to refuse outright. When Yang Lianxin finished outlining her proposal, Xuanhuang's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. The dignified Empress looked momentarily at a loss, then turned to Zhang Lianxin in astonishment. "Sister Lianxin, are you truly suggesting this?" Zhang Lianxin nodded gravely. "If you agree, I will speak to my husband myself." Xuanhuang bit her lip, torn between duty and modesty. She was on the verge of nodding, too shy even to utter a word. Sensing her hesitation, Zhang Lianxin offered a reassuring smile and stepped forward to relay the plan to Gu Yecheng. Gu Yecheng still couldn't quite believe what his wife, Zhang Lianxin, had whispered to Emperor Xuan. In an instant, the once formidable spirit realm master, renowned for her implacable coolness, had gone as coy and flustered as a shy schoolgirl. Gu Yecheng felt both dazzled and ashamed by the sight. He'd always thought himself unshakable, like a banished immortal, yet this display by Emperor Xuan left him at a loss for words. He turned to Zhang Lianxin, who only smiled. Of course, he did have a high opinion of Xuanhuang, especially after what happened at the Daluo Tiangong stronghold. When the cult's elite descended to seize him, she could easily have slipped away and abandoned him to his fate. Instead, she stayed, ready to lay down her life in his defense. Only Gu Yecheng knew the truth. With the protection of his Tianzun puppet, he was never truly in danger. Xuanhuang, in her selfless bravery, did not. Zhang Lianxin's plan was simplicity itself. She would wait until Gu Yecheng returned from Qianyu. Then, once she had borne their third daughter, she would move to arrange an official marriage between Gu Yecheng and Xuanhuang. In that single, cunningly arranged gesture, Zhang Lianxin would secure the bond between two of the most extraordinary souls Gu Yecheng had ever known, his fierce, steadfast wife and the gentle, devoted Emperor Xuan. It also spares you two from flirting with each other all day, though you're too shy to admit it. Zhang Lianxin's cheeks warmed as she teased her husband, fluttering her eyelashes. And just think, who was it that made you so strong? How could I possibly be flirting with you? Ye Cheng protested, though a secret smile tugged at his lips. Truth be told, he wasn't jealous of Emperor Xuan's body at all, only of his talent and destined path. Embarrassed to confess so plainly, he dropped his gaze and said with exaggerated deference, "I will submit to your every wish, my lady." In his heart, however, Ye Cheng looked forward eagerly to returning to Xianxia. After all, Zhang Lianxin had already given him 3 exceptionally gifted children. What if she were to bear a 4th, even more brilliant than Lianxin herself? He shook away the thought before it unsettled him. Clearing his throat, he called for their youngest 2. Since training in the Mengyo Spring, the siblings had soared to unprecedented heights. Their son, Gu Qingqian, now stood firmly in the mid-stage of the Xuanwang realm, while their daughter, Gu Yunxi, had broken through into the perfect Xuanwang stage. Together, they awaited their parents' next command. With their cultivation steadily advancing, Yunxi and her brother found themselves longing more and more to see the wider world. Their talent was solid, and Ye Cheng had prepared life-saving talismans for them both, so the idea of venturing outside for training was no longer far-fetched. Determined to broaden their horizons, Ye Cheng finalized the arrangements. They would all travel together to the boundary skies. On the appointed day, Ye Cheng, Yunxi, and her brother boarded Gu Hong's spirit boat. Crossing the void between the heavenly walls is perilous. Without a specialized defensive formation, a vessel's speed falters in the turbulent space currents, and hulls can be rent apart by sudden discharges of spatial energy. There have even been tragic accounts of boats shattering mid-voyage. Technically, Ye Cheng's own spirit boat was of a higher grade than Gu Hong's king-level vessel. Yet it lacked the critical inner realm formation that shields against void turbulence, and retrofitting it now would have taken too much time. So, despite his boat's superior raw power, Ye Cheng chose to travel aboard Gu Hong's fully protected craft. As the spirit boat lifted off, its protective wards humming softly, Yunxi pressed close to her brother. Ye Cheng offered them both reassuring smiles. Today marked their first real step into the unknown, an adventure that would test their skills, forge new bonds, and change their lives forever. Ye Cheng didn't bother to push his spirit boat any harder. The marginal gain in speed simply wasn't worth the extra effort. With a thought, the vessel rose into the air and surged toward the edge of the spirit domain, where the towering skywall marked the boundary of their world. He hadn't gone far when another flying boat appeared on the horizon, closing the distance in an instant until it skimmed alongside his. "Ha! Ye Cheng, prepare to see what I'm really capable of," called out his cousin, Gu Jie, from the rival deck. Gu Jie pranced back and forth, excitement shining in his eyes. He'd long been eager to best his old rival, and now he seized the moment. "Hand over that precious pill we wagered on. You've already lost our bet, and today I'm going to rub your defeat in your face."